Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of Alien Lizard Humanoids. This episode is an update on the Gabby Petito case and some discussions around relationships like interpersonal romantic relationships, as well as something called the missing white woman syndrome, which I've talked about. So first I'll introduce, or have my co-hosts introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Jeff. How you doing?
Hey, very good. My name is Jeff Pinson. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Delaware and Pennsylvania. I specialize in the treatment of OCD and other anxiety disorders. And, guys, if I wasn't a counselor, what I really wanted to do was be a very suspicious person who reads novels about murders and missing people. Like, that's what I wanted to do all day. Just be very suspicious, read murders, missing people. That's it.
Oh, so you wanted to make it an all-day thing?
All day.
I mean, like, as a counselor, you could still technically do that, but it wouldn't be all day.
No, I couldn't possibly have another career. That would be it. Just doing that all day long. It's going to take up all my time. Be very tiring and everything. So that was my goal.
Wow, that's a big aspiration.
Yeah,
It's living the life.
yeah. But inevitably, my hopes and dreams were crushed, and I became a counselor.
Right? Because you weren't independently wealthy to be able to do that.
Correct.
Right. Wow.
For some reason, people don't pay you to read books.
Right.
I don't get
It's a
it.
shame.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I mean, we were raised, when I was raised that people pay you to read books, right?
back in my day.
All I had to do was read 100 books, and I got a free personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut.
Back in my day, the coupon was all you needed.
I remember in elementary school, now, going back here to the 70s, where I think the honor system was something that still existed. There weren't cameras everywhere and everybody wasn't suspicious. But they would do the program in the library, the public schools, where it was like a book club or something, and you'd read so many books, and what you would get is a book.
Okay.
So it kind of defeated the people that were just, they were like, it was like second grade, third grade. There was kids like falsifying these logs. Like, I read 50 books. No, you didn't. You didn't read a single book. And then, the twist would be like, the library would be like, okay, here you go. It's a book. It's like poetic justice. All right. So tough break.
So it is a tough break.
I appreciate the support, guys.
Really tough, sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. My name's Mike Smith, also a licensed professional counselor in the state of Delaware. I focus in narrative therapy, geek therapy, and I am a self-styled expert in all things geek. I also recently started a venture to start using therapeutic D&D games to help people dealing with anxiety disorders. Primarily at this point, I'll be branching out into other disorders as I grow that particular group.
People really love that, by the way. Commenters love that you're doing that. They want in.
It's a great way of doing things, because it really kind of can pull people into a story, into a narrative. It allows me to also utilize some specific types of interventions in a much more kind of immediate way.
Nice. And if you tune in until the end, we'll answer questions that people had in the comments. And one of those questions was from Mike telling us more about the gaming groups and stuff like that. So absolutely. If I hadn't become a counselor, I think it was on my way to becoming like an owner manager of a Tex-Mex restaurant. Cool.
Yeah, I do. I enjoy smoking meats and steaks and brisket and all sorts of stuff. I love making barbecue sauce too. I make a mean barbecue sauce. People love it. But I actually didn't get into that kind of stuff until after I was already a counselor. So I that's on the back burner for the future career. If I ever fail out of being a counselor, or just decide, I'm going to hang up my counselor badge. I'm going to put it over here and just move on to something else. We'll start a restaurant.
The question is, if you were a manager of Tex-Mex restaurant, would you wear an ID card, ID badge?
I think I would have to.
Or would you be unnamed?
I don't know. I think I would have to, just because I would want people to know my name. But there is a thing to be said for an anonymous owner manager.
Yeah, it's a whole different type. It's out there.
Well, make sure you have cameras in your restaurant too that are working. So it's important.
It is important, but as long as you have the cameras up in places, it doesn't matter that they work. People be intimidated by that.
Very good, very good. So another, more dreams dashed. Could have been a manager of Tex-Mex restaurant.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, it's rough.
land of tough breaks. So moving to Gabby Petito. So this case, right? Whew. This case is something else. Now, we've covered a lot of different cases that were very popular in the media, or are popular in the media. Kristen Smart, Natalie Holloway, Jodi Arias, like mega cases, Scott Peterson. And we've actually talked about this before, like how some cases just for a number of reasons, which we'll talk about, become very popular. Other cases, which are just as interesting, don't.
Yeah.
And we try to cover a variety, but certainly there is, I wouldn't say a pressure, but there is an interest in certain cases, and that gets factored in when we choose to bring one in, to talk about it. Gabby Petito, at least it would seem, kind of blows almost every other case away in terms of the attention it's getting.
And not even just people that are into true crime necessarily, but I mean, people that don't really have an interest in that, but just saw it on the news or, are sad that she was missing and now we know what happened to her. But so it really goes beyond just those people that are normally into this kind of stuff, normally interested in it, but really has a wider breadth of people interested in it.
If you think about the true crime cases, something has to bring you into true crime, right? For a lot of people, in my generation, it was the serial killers. Ted Bundy, a major contributor to people being interested in true crime. But these days, I think it is cases like Gabby Petito. They're bringing a lot of people in, and they're like, wow, this is really interesting. Like, it builds critical thinking skills. It's kind of like a mystery to solve. True crime just keeps giving and giving. Not so much to the victims, of course.
Yeah.
Right. But in terms of like an audience that consumes it, it really is like no other genre. Right. In that way.
In this particular case, you introduced us as Alien Lizard Humanoids because kind of this is a part 2. We've already done one video on this. But at this point, and spoiler alert, this is a murder part.
Yeah, it could really be considered either one. But I don't want to confuse things by switching,
switching titles.
Yeah.
But we tend to look at those cases that the media has put a lot out there on, that people followed, that had a big impact on a large variety of people, and they garnered an interest. So we wanted to give our 2 cents worth into those particular cases.
And there's a cycle that builds, right? When the media takes an interest, people will start uploading court documents and other doing other articles. They'll investigate, like 48 Hours will pick it up, 2020 will pick it up, Dateline. So more information becomes available and allows us to do a more comprehensive analysis. So it's not like we just can't randomly pick a case and bring up a lot of information. I really wish I could, because there are many cases I think are probably incredible, but when I search and try to get data, there's very little available, or it's kind of sketchy. It's like one book or one article and everyone else copied the same thing. And I'm like, I don't think so. But when you have these cases like Gabby Petito, we know this is real. This has been covered by multiple journalists, multiple companies, talking to different people, and we see this convergence, this of what happened. You can't always get that with every case.
And this one's a little bit different too, because not only are we seeing it in real time, we don't always get to do that, but it's not necessarily that people are seeing a lot of it on news networks. It's primarily really that people are seeing it on social media outlets, TikTok videos and Twitter and Instagram and things like that, which of course is Gabby and Brian were very into that to begin with in YouTube. But then people were giving information through those mediums as well. Now, of course, there's, they're giving them to the authorities as well, letting them know about that information, videos and reported sightings and everything. But it created this kind of a following of what the internet sleuths or something like that, people that were looking into this, trying to figure out details, trying to figure out clues that perhaps other people had missed, and really looking at the videos, analyzing them, and using software and zooming in and enhancing the videos, things like that, to try to see are there clues in here that in the past perhaps it would be just left up to the police, investigators to do this kind of work. But a lot of people have been taking it into their own hands and doing a lot of that work themselves. So it's an interesting twist on things, and I'm sure we'll see more of that as of course social media is only ever going to get bigger, I'm sure we'll see more of that, more of people being interested in it, doing things like that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that drew us into this case was how fast it was updating, how quickly. I mean, our first video on this, we did like 5 updates in the middle of making the video.
Right.
And
it was like a news station.
Yeah.
This is just in.
It's like breaking news. Just in. It was that fast. And over the last, and we recorded that, exactly 1 week ago from when we're recording this. Mm-hmm. And there have been so many updates since then that it's been incredible.
Which we will talk about.
Right.
Yeah. I want to mention as we before we get to the update. Or do you have something else, Mike?
I was just going to comment on the social media aspect of this case. One of the things that has driven is that social media presence. Like witnesses are they're going to the investigators, like they're sending investigators and telling, and then making TikToks. It's like at least 2 people we'll talk about tonight just made TikToks about their things and just put it out there on social media just to push that. To push it and push it and push it. So, the social media has been driving up interest, which of course then draws the mainstream media into, well, people are interested in this, so let's cover it. And then every outlet is just grabbing everything they can because it continues to be popular.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a cycle to it, right? It's a feedback loop. And the media is very astute at how much, how many views they're getting, how much attention they're getting. And they, at this point, they're on max. Like they're trying to find every bit of information possible. Mm-hmm. So like, you once heard of Gabby, you once passed her in a mall. Yeah, we want to talk to you, right? It's like, it's that intense. Like, what was she wearing? A blue shirt. Blue?
Have you ever known anyone named Gabrielle? I know a dude named Gabriel. Really? What were they wearing?
Tell us more.
Is this a secret identity of Brian?
I'm going to go make a TikTok on this.
There you go. It'll get 100,000 views, in minutes.
A good example is the we'll do the update here, but was a trail camera that got that guy. And he did kind of look like Brian. And then there was another camera that picked up somebody who had a tattoo on his arm. Right. And I'm like, that's clearly not him. I mean, unless he faked it, but it was this complex tattoo. But it's still being reported. I'm like, that's not even really news. There's a tattoo. Tell us when you
like
have a picture of the guy.
I heard somebody call it a hunt for Bigfoot because you have these grainy pictures, and you're like, is that him? And, and probably 50 years later, maybe there's people that are like, no, that was really him. I swear. And they're like, people that follow that believe in Bigfoot sightings now are like, going to be Brian sightings, a few years from now.
Somebody also took a picture in a hotel. Did you see that image? Like, I guess she chased the guy and like taking the picture. It actually does look like him too. It's in Canada. I doubt he's in Canada, but who knows? It really, like,
yeah. You
look at these pictures and you're like, no, there's no way. But then there's a part of you that thinks maybe it does look like him.
It's possible. And that's what draws people in too, is just, I don't know. And I want to know. I want to figure this out. So let me look at this video too. Let me figure it out for myself. Let me have an opinion on this. And there you have, more popularity for certain videos or certain, here's a picture, maybe it's Brian. Let me look at it. Let me figure it out.
I never knew there was such a demand or so many people that look like Brian Laundrie.
Well, as he was described at one point, Brian Laundrie is generic white guy. Okay, I think that was how he was described by somebody as a generic white guy and white woman. Like,
yeah.
So,
but he has no hair, and that's unusual for his age category, right?
That's true.
I would think more people in their 20s would still have. Some people choose not to have hair, but that seems young to not have hair.
Yeah. I don't know why anyone would choose not to have hair.
Oh, some people shave their, yeah.
I don't know. I don't get it. I don't.
Yeah. It's a look. I mean, I think some people in the military, that's something like, because that can really slow you down and get in your way with hair. And police officers are known to shave their heads. That seems to be a popular thing.
I would think that it might be a little bit, and I don't know about this, it might be a little bit more popular in certain states in the Southwest.
I think so.
Where it's a lot hotter.
Yeah.
Having a big head of hair might be a little bit too warm. So keeping it close cropped and down or even shaving it off probably a little bit more popular there than it is here on the East Coast.
Yeah, what's interesting is he has a beard and mustache.
Yeah, but they're pencil thin. They're not a real beard.
I'm seeing a theme here, Mike.
Brian, you can call me when you get a real beard.
He might come out of hiding then if challenge him.
I'll
like
take
that,
the challenge.
Mike.
I can grow this huge beard.
It's like, hey, if he stays in the woods and becomes mountain man and grows a beard like this, he can come out and accept the challenge of this beard.
There you go.
He's going to pull a Ted Kaczynski. Right?
Chris, then, I don't know, I hate to spoil it, but he'd probably get caught at that point if he came out
Yeah.
of hiding.
But he wouldn't want to refuse the challenge.
No,
That's true.
no beard would want to refuse a challenge like that.
So let's take a look at the updates. We'll go through. So Jeff, you'll give us an update, like a summary of the case, and then we'll go through some of the notable updates. And it's been a week, but there have been quite a few fairly significant and many minor updates in the case that I think reshape it a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's go with the summary. Let's hear about this case.
All right, so we'll go through it pretty quickly. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it, but two main people here, Brian Laundrie, Gabby Petito, started dating in 2019, got engaged in July 2020. July 2nd, 2021, July 2nd of this year, they began a cross-country trip. They started in Blue Point, New York, Gabby's parents' house, and they went in a white Ford Transit van, and they went cross-country. They intended to end the trip in October in Oregon. They had done the trip before, went cross-country before in a car and wanted to do it again, and they were real interested in van life. They retrofitted the van a little bit to make it more comfortable to live in over those months. And so they intended to end in October in Oregon. So they, July 4th, they were in Kansas, and they went over to Colorado, Utah, so that takes us to, and I'm obviously I'm skipping dates here, but that takes us to August 12th is the first real noteworthy thing that we're aware of at that point. There was a physical fight that was reported at a co-op in Utah named the Moonflower Community Cooperative. So they leave the store and police find the van and pull them over. Brian was driving and kind of had some erratic driving when the police were behind him. He was speeding as well. So they pull him over, and there was a domestic incident. And ultimately, the police officers' conclusions were that Gabby was the aggressor in that situation. Now we'll talk more about that, but that was their conclusion, and it ended up no charges were pressed, but police asked them to separate for the night. They sent Brian to a hotel, and Gabby had the van for that night. So that's August 12th. And Gabby, you can see the video online, the body cam video, and Gabby can be seen crying, very emotional. And it's about a little bit less than an hour and a half. And so that's where we see a lot of the information. We get a picture of what the relationship was like, but also potentially a look at maybe some things that we didn't see in there. Some we could hypothesize about what the relationship's actually like versus the pictures and the videos that they posted. Seems so perfect a relationship, but we get a glimpse that maybe it's not so great, and maybe there's some things that are intentionally hidden from the cameras that we might be able to see in that video. So that happens, and so from there until the end of August, there's more pictures taken, more pictures posted on Instagram. There's video posted on YouTube. And that brings us August 25th. Gabby speaks with her family for the last time. She posted her last Instagram photo that day. And they were supposed to meet a friend of Gabby's at Yellowstone National Park. But they did not make it. They did not meet the friend. August 30th, Gabby's family received a message from them stating there's no service in Yosemite National Park. And there's some, her family takes issue with that and thinks maybe it wasn't her that actually sent it. So that brings us to September 1st. Brian returns to Florida in Gabby's van, in the white van, by himself. No Gabby. So we go to... Now I got to go to my other notes here. So September 1st returns. September 11th, Gabby's family files a missing persons report. And then as soon as Brian got home, or shortly after that, he obtained a lawyer. So September 14th, his lawyer issues a statement that the family is staying in the background of the investigation. So then we learned that first thing we heard was that Brian's family, rather the police knew where Brian was the whole time and they know where he's at. And then a body is found near Grand Teton National Park on September 19th. And then 2 days later, it was confirmed that it was Gabby's body. And then we also learn in the midst of that they don't know where Brian's at either. So now it's confirmed that Gabby has been murdered. Ultimately is what they confirmed, that she was murdered. It was considered a homicide. But that Brian is not known where he's at. They thought he was in the house, as my understanding. Police thought he was in the house, but then we find out that they don't know where he's at. He had been missing since that Tuesday, which I don't have the date written here.
I think it was the 14th.
Was it the 14th? Yeah, the 14th. He was missing since the 14th. So that brings us, I believe, into all the details that we had last time, with the exception of Gabby's body being found. That leads us into everything that we found out since. And there might be stuff that I missed in there as well, if you guys want to add anything.
Yeah, it was we filmed on a Friday night, and we had up to, finding out that I think it was the last update we had in that video was that Brian Laundrie had been missing since Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And then it was 2 days later, Sunday night, when they revealed that they had found a body that was believed to be Gabby, that fit her description,
right.
And they were going to do an autopsy. And then it was a few days after that when they finally did confirm, and that they said that it was homicide.
And we don't know the cause of death yet.
And we do not. They have not released any further findings from the autopsy.
Right, but they have said that it's a homicide, and that they don't believe it was anything. They don't believe that she killed herself, but that somebody else had killed her.
Yeah, so major. That's a major update.
Yeah,
and certainly, I find it interesting. Now they might still be trying to collect evidence, but we know that Brian has not been charged with murder, even though they determined it was a homicide.
Right.
So that's led people to speculate: was there no DNA? Was there no other something that would have tied him to that crime? But they did charge him with a crime. Well, they don't have him yet, but they would like to charge him when they can get him in custody.
A federal grand jury in Wyoming charged him with a federal crime.
Yeah, he's been indicted. So this is for using one of Gabby's credit cards, I guess ostensibly, on his way back, right?
Actually, they haven't released who the credit card or debit card belonged to.
So just a card that was not his.
A card that was not his, and $1,000 worth of charges and withdrawals between the 28th and the 1st.
So the trip, right?
Basically, yeah, the trip back. Yeah. From
so it strongly suggests that it was Gabby's card, but it could have been maybe a relative that didn't give him authorization, something like that.
Could have been one he stole.
Right.
But that's the point. In all likelihood, it was Gabby's. But the indictment doesn't actually make that clear. The indictment just says that it was an unauthorized use of a credit card or debit card.
And if it was Gabby's, so I was thinking, if it was Gabby's, I wonder if that means that they have narrowed down an approximate day when they believe that she was killed, or an approximate time or something. Because if he had used her debit card, again, assuming that it's hers, then in an unauthorized way, then that would mean that perhaps, I think, that she wasn't alive to give authorization. Because how else would they know if there wasn't authorization? Trying to think, they need to be able to build a case around this. So I wonder if that means that they have a bit more information than we do, which makes sense, right? They're the investigators. Or what the implications of that are.
Honestly, I think the implications of it are pretty minimal. I think that really what that indictment was to be able to hold him on federal. If they find him, they have an indictment, they have a warrant. Think about it, we got you, we're putting you in federal holding. Because honestly, if it was Gabby's, there's really no way they can prove that he didn't have authorization to use it. The reason that the Northport police didn't arrest him for returning with her van and not her was because it was a communal property, and they were living together. All he has to do is say, I used her card all the time. She gave me blanket access to it.
But if she was dead, at that time, then she couldn't have given authorization. So I don't know what they're.
But it's one of those, especially with domestic partners in many places in many states, that the cohabitation and the long term use. All he had to do is say, she told me multiple times that I could use it, and she never told me specifically that I wasn't allowed to. So then he could be like, well, I found the van and just drove home because I couldn't find her. Mm-hmm. And I was using the card to get the van home.
Maybe.
And at that point, it's like, she told me I could use it. There's no reason why he would believe that he wasn't allowed to use it. This, that, or the other. That's just a defense theory that could happen. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't think that this particular charge is meant to stand. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're trying to get him to be able to charge him with this crime so that he'll go to jail on it. I think it's just so they have a warrant, so they can pick him up and hold him. And then once they have him, they can do more.
There's probably no question he used the card. I imagine they have record that, maybe even video, if he used it in the store or whatever. The authorization is going to be the point. So it seems like it could be easily defended. He left. She was still alive when he left. He had always used the card. He used the card. It's a pretty clean defense, really. It gets trickier if they thought that he knew she was dead. But then again, that would seem to lead closer to a murder charge, which we don't see.
Yeah.
So when he's found, if he's found, he'll have to face that one charge and then whatever else they may or may not come up with. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem, I hope they have information they're not releasing, because this seems pretty weak at this point.
Yeah.
Where is he? Is he guilty of murder? Do you have evidence that he committed murder? What are you doing to find him? You're searching around, the Carlton Reserve. They keep renewing that search. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult search with the conditions, the swampy conditions. I think if they had something, you would think they would release like some information about his location, because people would help to find him.
Oh yeah.
But
and that's another update you just mentioned. Kind of slipped it in there. The Carlton Reserve.
The Carlton Reserve.
The Northport Police, FBI have been searching the reserve. It's near Northport in Florida. They've been searching that reserve during all daylight hours for 6 of the last 7 days.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn. I wasn't surprised to learn that the reserve has alligators and poisonous snakes. 25,000 acre reserve. I was shocked to learn it had panthers.
Yeah.
Panthers in Florida?
Yeah.
Now we know.
I just didn't think. I mean, I lived in Florida at the time. I didn't think there were panthers down there. Never ran into a panther. Many ducks, aggressive ducks, but no panthers.
Yeah. I wonder how prevalent they are. I mean, that's a, what kind of wildlife is there and how prevalent is it would be an indicator of how well someone might be able to survive in that kind of environment,
Well, if the mosquito or the panthers didn't get them, the mosquitoes would, right? I mean, they have to be the size of pterodactyls in that
in
park.
A swamp, right?
Yeah, so we don't know where he is, and we don't know what's going to happen to him if he's found alive.
It seems that the Florida panther is actually very vulnerable and endangered species. Apparently only 120 to 130 of them left in the wild.
Oh, wow.
But apparently it was a subspecies that was pretty populous in the area for quite some time. But much like mountain lions that they're closely related to, they need kind of wilderness areas to survive, game to survive on. Yeah. And when that gets taken over, they lose a lot of their wilderness area to live. So yeah, only 120 to 130. So not surprising you didn't run across very many panthers.
Right, wouldn't expect to.
While you were in there, I think you might be more likely to come across a football player with a Panther jersey on than an actual Florida Panther.
That might be the first sports reference we've ever made on this.
And I think we might have talked about sports ball some other time.
Yeah, sports ball. I mean, that's a congratulatory thing. I don't know that any of us are really into sports, but it's.
Of course, I could be completely wrong about the Panthers being a football team. So
hey, and that's all right. Nobody seems to care anyway. Nobody's mentioned sports or anything, so I think we're good.
Yeah, I used to watch. Watch a lot of boxing.
Right.
It's a terrible sport that no one should watch, and yet I watched it for many years.
I really watch boxing in like the Rocky movies.
Yeah, it should absolutely be banned, but yet I couldn't resist. Yeah.
There's a oh, it's not famous. I was about to say famous. There's a video of two kids boxing. They might be teenagers, but it's a very old video, considered to be one of the first videos, I believe. And it's suspected that it was taken here in Delaware. There's a park in Wilmington, something Springs Park. Either way, but it's suspected that the video was taken in that park in like the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, something along those lines. And I think it's available probably on YouTube or something. I've seen this video before, but it was two kids boxing, and there was another person there, and you couldn't really tell who this other person was, but it's suspected that this person was some other famous boxer from years later or something like that, or around that time. And that's what makes people think the video was taken in Delaware, because that boxer, it was from Delaware. It was from Dover, I think. And so it was really interesting. Like, I have no interest in boxing, but it's like, okay, old videos are cool. Like, history about things is cool. Sports, okay. But old videos and things about Delaware. So it checked all my boxes, really. So I'll have to figure out what that was. Maybe somebody out there knows.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I love the historical stuff too.
Yeah.
And, boxing movies are great.
There's been a lot of remarkable boxing movies.
Oh, yeah. Cinderella Man was great. Russell Crowe.
All the Rockies. The Rockies weren't too good. The original Rocky was very good.
Rocky was great. Rocky 2 was good too, because it was kind of just a continuation of Rocky. Rocky 3 was where things started going downhill, but it did give us Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah. Rocky 4 had its moments.
Rocky 4, I thought Rocky 4 was one of the best ones. Yeah. Rocky 5 and afterwards kind of.
Yeah. Wasn't it in the movie Airplane where the guy was going to buy a bomb from the store and the
Airplane 2. Yeah.
Airplane 2. And the background, that's what the space shuttle. In the background there was like a magazine. It was like Rocky 36 or something.
Oh, is it? Yeah, poster. And it was, Sylvester Stallone, he was like, you had a walker or something. Yeah.
Spaceballs, they make a reference. It's like, next, Rocco's review of Rocky 5,000. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, because they just kept making Rocky movies.
The guy, was that, and this is before my time, but was that Sonny Bono that was in Airplane 2?
Am I correct on that? Yeah,
I think so.
He's married to Cher.
Right.
And he died in a skiing accident sometime later.
Right. So he was the one that was buying the bomb from the airport and, put it in his briefcase and everything. And the whole movie was kind of built around that. But yeah, it was, yeah.
Airplane 2. One of the, William Shatner.
Yeah.
Was great in that. One of my favorite parts of that movie is when he walks up to the door, goes, shh, and opens the doors.
Turns around. Shh.
I do that when I'm out someplace. Like I'll either, like if I go someplace and it's got the automatic doors, I either like pretend I'm a Jedi, or I just go shh and watch it open.
Wasn't he talking on the radio as the space shuttle was coming in?
It was destroying the building around him. He's trying to talk them down, looking ahead, and yeah. That was the same one where he, they said, the guy behind him said like, I think that was the one where he said, shouldn't we turn on some lights or something? He stopped. He said, no, that's exactly what they'll be expecting. That might be the first one. I don't know, but
yeah. And then wasn't he like in a window through a door, and then the door?
Oh,
it was like it was to make you think it was a monitor.
Right.
Yeah, Airplane 2 was every bit as good as Airplane 1.
But different directors. Yeah. And I didn't know that for years. And it's like, well, it's pretty much the same people. And it feels the same with the exception of like, I think with the exception of when they go onto the moon. And that feels a little bit different than the first one did. But I mean, not, it's a sequel. What do you expect, But I thought it was great.
Yeah. Really, really good movies. Rocky movies, not that good.
No, see, I did like Rocky Balboa, and then Rocky, and the Creed movies I actually like too. Those are pretty good. Michael B. Jordan's a phenomenal actor.
My favorite thing about the Creed, I've never seen the Creed movies, but my favorite thing to come out of that was references to the band Creed. And so there's a video of the frontman for the band Creed, Scott Stapp, and he does a movie review on the movie Creed. And so he comes on there, he's like, there's no mention of the band Creed. It's like, okay. And then Scott Stapp gives it a review. You usually give a certain star review. He gives it like 2 arms wide open, which is a reference to one of their songs. He says, I give it 2 arms wide or 3 arms wide open or something. And I thought it was perfect because, just the reference to Creed, the band there, and, everything that comes with that.
I listened to Creed quite a bit when I was a teenager, and it wasn't years later when I was working in inpatient, I found out they have a huge connection to the recovery community. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of themes, and a lot of their music is about recovery from substance use.
Yeah. Scott Stapp was when the band was active, and my understanding still is in recent years as well. Very big in that, not only as an advocate, but also as a consumer of that. So, yeah, for sure.
So continuing with the updates, things that are new this time around. There's been a few. So Gabby's body was found. We know that, and Brian's still missing. Right. There's been a few kind of smaller revelations that I think are still pretty interesting. Kind of go through them here. One of the ones I found fascinating was there's a YouTube channel. These people, I think they drive around in like a camper, as I understand it. And there are many of these channels out there where, like, I guess you leave your job. I don't think they quit their jobs or whatever if I had jobs, but you go, you get a camper, you get the cameras mounted everywhere, and you drive around, and basically you just talk to people about like where you are, and like living in a camper, how it's hard, how it's great, whatever. Just talk about it. Yeah. And some of them are actually pretty good. I didn't really watch any of their other videos, so I don't know what theirs was like, but it seemed like, from what I could tell, kind of a standard format that you see.
Right.
Pretty good amount of views, but clearly when they commented on this case, the views exploded. They had this one video, I think it was taken with a GoPro. It was really high definition, like beyond high definition, like 4K or whatever. Very clear, except they had some, like, I don't know what that was, like a spider web or whatever, right in the middle.
Right in the important part.
As you're looking at it, you're trying to like, get that off of there.
Get that eyelash off of there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was in a very frustrating location. They also had video of them, the guy had video of him driving.
Right. So both directions.
Yeah, it was okay.
I mean, I guess that makes for a good like bank of video to choose from when you're making a video to actually put it up, not just the single shot of forward, but also seeing what's going on in the RV, which it looks like they have kids. So I'm sure the kids are running around the whole time or doing whatever they're doing in an RV while they're driving. So, I mean, I'm sure it makes for interesting videos.
Yeah, I guess you just keep that running. Like, you're out there, you just keep that running all the time. It must generate like massive number of gigabytes of video doing that in 4K. Can't imagine. It's lucky they kept it, because I would think they'd be frequently deleting stuff that they're not going to use. So either way, they're in Grand Teton, and they're driving on this unpaved road, and they come across a 2012 Transit Connect, which is clearly belongs to Gabby. You can see the bumper stickers, whatever they have on there, on the back, the ladder. It was definitely the same vehicle. Right. And, you think, okay, well, somebody had to see it. That's not necessarily notable. But the part that really got me was the door closing. The video where they're coming up the trail. If you look like way down, you can see that I guess it was the passenger side rear door, definitely seemed to be open. It could have been a tree, and there was all the other explanations. It was open, in my opinion.
And there's some great videos out there of people zooming in and enhancing it and everything, and it's very clear when it's zoomed in, enhanced, and really made more clear.
But how creepy is that? So what you picture, of course, we don't know, but what you picture is Brian in there. He sees this, I think it's an older RV, look like on the inside, did not look new. This older RV coming up the road, and he's like, you don't see him, you don't know that, but that's what you picture. Which is really, really, sends a shiver up your spine.
And that was August 27th, which you start to develop a timeline kind of like who saw what and when, and so Yeah, there was two other things that people have noted. There was a pair of sandals or flip-flops on the ground right outside of the van. And I don't know if you can tell whose they are, Brian's or Gabby's. But there was that thing from the body cam footage that Gabby was saying that Brian wasn't wearing shoes in the restaurant or whatever it was. So I don't know. I mean, does that indicate that she was alive then or not? I don't think so, but it gives room for speculation. The other thing, and I only saw this one place, and I'm glad nobody else was thinking about this. Did you guys hear anything about the speculation that Gabby was pregnant?
No.
Good.
No.
You're better off because there's no. So there was the same video right before that. There's a log or something. So it was probably 20 or 30 feet before the van. There's a log or something, and there's two things leaning up against this log. It just looked like two pieces of paper. Now the first one looks like a rectangle shaped piece of paper, and it looks like it has 3 something on it. 3 images, maybe 3 boxes of text. I don't know. There were some people that were speculating that it was a sonogram picture, and they're like, "Oh my, that must be Gabby's. She must have been pregnant." And it's like, come on, you guys are really reaching here. Is it possible? Maybe it's possible, and anything's possible, but is it likely? No, not at all. I mean, that's not even the point here, And why would they leave that there?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that that's not a widely circulated thing because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's almost at the QAnon level. You see about the thing with the QAnon where they're saying that Gabby was false. What was it called? A crisis actor.
False flag.
Yeah, false flag,
false
crisis
flag.
actor thing, which is what they do with all kinds of high-profile events. So the QAnon playbook pretty much only has one page, right? Joe Biden's awful, or whatever. Select the Democrat.
Right.
Is awful, and people were trying to hide that by staging events to attract media attention, the public's attention. Right. Interestingly, though, I don't think QAnon's right, but Joe Biden is having the worst time ever right now. Because that's really fueling, whatever is in the media, QAnon's going to go after and say, well, that's distracting from Joe Biden. Yeah. It's like a garbage dump fire. It's terrible. When Biden's still I thought he would recover somewhat after the whole Afghanistan situation. I thought that was terrible, and I thought he failed, but I figured he would bounce back.
Right.
People bounce back. It's been all downhill.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Really surprised me. I wasn't really necessarily rooting for him. I mean, to the extent that if he does well, the country does well, I root for him. But I'm not a big fan at this point of Biden. And QAnon, of course, is not either for different reasons.
Right. Yeah. So they got a lot of fuel for their fire as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got personal reasons for not liking Joe Biden, but politically, I don't know. I don't pay a lot of attention right now to what's going on with the president, and I didn't pay a lot of attention, more than 4 years ago.
Right.
Unfortunately, I had a lot of attention shoved in my face over the course of 4 years. And now I'm actually kind of like, oh, good, it's not being shoved in my face anymore.
Yeah. If anything, this story, I mean, obviously the Gabby Petito story is tragic, but it's interesting to look at the story instead of hearing updates about Joe Biden. Yeah. It's a nice change of pace. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because politics generally dominates the news. Yeah. I think things are better when true crime dominates the news. Yeah. My opinion.
Usually gets better results.
Yeah. I think it means that there's some stability or sense of stability in politics. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stupid crap going on in politics right now, but it's more along the lines of, well, status quo.
Business as usual.
Status quo stupidity rather than what is going on right now. Stupidity.
Yeah.
So that we can get more interest in these kinds of things. I would think that if any kind of pregnancy was real, we would have heard that from the coroner, immediately. That would have been one of the details that would have been like, okay, so we've identified it as Gabby. It was homicide. Oh, and she was pregnant, so that's 2 homicides. Mm-hmm. I think that would have been immediate.
Right.
But it could still be coming. Don't know.
And we saw a video of her before that, and never had a sonogram to be pregnant, but from what my wife tells me, and from what I remember from that with our kids, you don't get a sonogram like right away because there's really nothing to look at, right? It's small, it's kind of indistinguishable. But you got to wait a little bit until the baby grows, right? And they're out camping in the middle of nowhere. Not like sonograms just are on the side of the road everywhere. So like the possibility
is on a sonogram booth where you go and put the quarters in.
I think the picture was right next to the sonogram booth. So maybe, so
so you go to the picture booth and you sit there both together and I get the strip of pictures and you go next to the sonogram booth.
That's
next.
what it is.
Do they have the complimentary lubricant? You just
Yes. That's exactly what it is. Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, they put them in all national parks. I'm pretty sure. Right. It's just put a quarter in.
I saw those last time I was down at Disney.
That's. Yeah. So I mean, there's timeline wise, and she's. We saw a video. She's a very skinny person, so like something like that would show pretty easily, I would think. So like it just doesn't make any sense, and I don't know where this came from. Like who thought this one up and thought that it was actually a possibility, or was it just somebody heard something? Was like, oh wait, maybe it may heard a rumor or something. Wait, maybe that's a possibility. Let me look for details that support this.
It's funny we mentioned Disney and like sonogram booths and things. Like it's not a thing right now, but it probably will be soon. And they'll have a filter that puts the mouse ears on the image. It says,
"Happy pregnancy."
Ignore the ears.
I'm Mickey.
I was at Disney. Ignore the ears. Yeah, that's not part of it. Yeah, so that video of the van, of the door closing, has got to be one of the creepiest things to come out of this. Yeah. It's something else. Yeah. It's something I see in a Netflix documentary in the future. Like that'll be that van door closing.
Yeah, but that really we do have to keep timeline. Like I don't have to me the exact times of things going on, but this video was taken on the 27th.
Yeah, they said around 6 p.m. is what the family says.
And the 27th was one of the last known. This is another one of the updates. One of the last known sightings of Gabby alive at a restaurant.
Right.
So I mean, like if that was, I don't remember the time that they were supposedly at the restaurant, but
between 2 and 3 p.m.
2 and 3 p.m. Okay, so yeah, this could have been after. So it does speak to the creep because I was like, I don't remember the time. So if this was like in the evening, like 8 o'clock at night, was ever at the restaurant and this door closing, like. Well, she was still alive at that point.
I was thinking that too. And so between 2 and 3, this was a restaurant at Jackson Hole, Wyoming on the 27th. Brian was reportedly aggressively arguing with the staff. And so this came from somebody that was in the restaurant, reported to have seen this. The manager of the restaurant, unnamed, at a Tex-Mex restaurant.
Oh, they want the unnamed route.
Right. The unnamed route.
Right.
With that. Oh, Tex-Mex restaurant too.
Yeah. You could. It's still a chance, Mike. You can go over there.
I know it could be. It's a possibility.
So the manager confirmed that they were there, and so Brian was seen reportedly aggressively arguing with the staff. Gabby reportedly came back later. I don't know. It doesn't say how much later, but later. So it could have been a few minutes. I don't know. Came back and apologized for Brian's behavior, and she was crying apparently and just very upset and apologized for his behavior. So that's between 2 and 3. The video of the RV. Driving past the van, they report was 6 p.m. And then they said they came back later. The van was still there later that night. So they didn't give a time for that second time they came back. And there's no video of that I'm aware of. But you would like to, you probably assume that maybe it was 2 hours later, 3 hours later, something like that. So the van was still there, as far as I know, in the same spot. So this all happened on the 27th. Again, like you said, Mike, the last reported sighting of Gabby, last time that anybody had reported seeing her.
I do think it's important to note that while they did report that Brian was aggressive, it wasn't physical violence. He wasn't being physically aggressive towards anyone. He's like raised voice, probably a few swear words, a few choice ones here or there. And that they did mention that he went in and out several times. Like he left and then went back in and then left again at least once.
Yeah.
There was a couple that commented on this, I guess, same incident, seeing him at the restaurant. And I can't remember what one of them said. It was something like you could feel the anger, or it was like almost like it was an aura of anger.
Yeah.
Which is a much different statement, like, oh, that guy was upset.
Yeah.
To suggest it was kind of radiating off of him. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe the effect was added later because the case has significance, but he did seem to be quite angry, which is different than what we picture earlier with the body camera footage, where he seemed to be like calm,
Right.
and like
Very conversational, and
this is no big deal, work it out. You know, like sorry about that speeding, sorry about speeding in the past, you know, all that stuff. Here you have somebody who appears later to not have great control over anger, to the point where Gabby feels compelled to apologize to people that he's interacted with.
yeah. We would hear similar things, or we have heard similar things from friends saying that the relationship was toxic, people saying that Brian was controlling. I believe I saw also that people would say that he had an anger problem, or at least issues with anger at times. So yeah, you're very right, Dr. Grande, that the image, what one might perceive from the body cam footage is a different kind of mental image than what we gather from all these other events. Now, people would also talk about domestic issues and how that might have been a factor in their relationship, which we can talk more about. But again, Brian was we said in the last one, kind of jovial, kind of just, you know, everything was fine with this body cam footage. But there was also indicators that maybe he was putting on a front. Maybe he was putting on a different kind of personality than what he's actually like behind closed doors.
It speaks to the allegations of being manipulative and demanding and controlling.
Right.
This was really a relationship that involved some mistreatment, and he was good at hiding it. But Gabby, of course, was not. She was crying. She was emotional. Was attracted the attention of law enforcement with whatever happened between them, with the who hit who, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, you can start to build a theory that's, you know, maybe decent around what he was really like, or is still like, if he's out there somewhere.
Right.
Presumably is.
And noting that the physical evidence from the police video does show that Brian sustained injuries, like multiple injuries. It indicates it's not just a one-sided toxic relationship. That, yeah, Brian very likely was angry, and controlling, manipulative, but that kind of thing breeds response. And as emotional, Gabby was definitely emotional. She was definitely there, but she also, I don't think he inflicted those wounds on himself.
Yeah, probably
And
not. Yeah.
It's escalation on both, it happens on both sides.
Right. When there's a relationship that's plagued by toxicity, you know, when it involves kind of these again, kind of mistreatment inside the relationship, it's usually, you know, one person's more responsible than the other, but both can be involved. And I think that's kind of the confusing situation that occurred with this traffic stop. She kind of looked like the aggressor, but ultimately she ended up dead. So we can kind of reason through and think, all right, if Brian was responsible for that death, certainly he was the worst offender in that relationship. But maybe that's part of the manipulation, you know, like antagonizing somebody, pushing somebody. When you get a response, you know, now you can play the victim. But strangely, he didn't seem to play the victim too much in that encounter.
Right. There were things that didn't line up.
Yeah.
With what we
Like
might see
he
with
could
a
have really
typical profile.
overplayed that, right? I mean, the police were practically asking him to overplay it. You know, like, ooh, look at that scratch. You know, like he could be like, yeah, I'm traumatized or whatever, and they probably would have arrested her if he had asked. She would have been arrested.
I'm sure that if he had asked, they would have. But I think we jump to conclusions where we say, okay, well, this incident is connected to what happened to her later. It may not have been.
It's true.
You know, and the fact of the matter is we just don't have the evidence to say that it had any connection. We actually don't, like, I personally have my belief that Brian had something to do with her death, but we actually don't have the evidence of it right now.
I think this is one of those.
We don't.
Right, we
because
don't. Yeah, somebody might.
Like you said, the investigators might. The autopsy might reveal something that gives us a much more clear indication, maybe DNA under fingernails or hair somewhere or something like that. We don't know. We don't know when we're making this video. We don't know.
I think this is where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, yeah, you don't know, but there does seem to be a trajectory. Like the more we found out in this case, the worse it looks for Brian.
Yeah. And,
no matter what happened, it seems clear that that relationship was not healthy.
No, it wasn't. Right. And I don't want anyone out there who's watching us to think I'm trying to victim blame Gabby and say, oh, she deserves it. She absolutely did not. And that is not at all what I want to say. I just want to say that I have seen relationships where, yes, one person is what we objectively say clearly the abuser, but the cycle of abuse in that relationship prompts the other person to escalate into physical altercations as well. And this has been both sides, male and female, where it's like one pushes buttons and pushes buttons and pushes buttons until the other one physically assaults. And then it's, oh, look, this person assaulted me. And again, like you said, they play the victim, at least within the context of the relationship, to say, okay, look, now you've abused me. You've done this to me. And now you need to feel sorry for me and feel sorry for what you've done. When, if we objectively look at what happened, the escalation started and was manipulated all the way up. I'm not saying that that's what happened with Gabby. But it is something that could have been from Brian. Or his manipulations, him pushing buttons, pushed her into attacking him.
Right. Well, that's the pattern, right? I mean, the pattern. So years ago, these types of domestic violence situations were very straightforward, right? There'd be an injury, the police would come out, somebody get arrested. Now, offenders are more savvy, right? They know that, I'm going to use the example of a man striking a woman. Obviously, it doesn't have to be that way, but the man would know that if he struck like his wife or partner, he was going to jail. That became pretty much a standard policy in many police departments. I know in this county, for a while, Newcastle County, they had a policy where if they came out, somebody was getting arrested. Now, I don't know if that's really something that could have survived appeal, but right. That was how kind of desperate the police were to protect people and the officers, because the officers were getting hit in these processes too. Now they send 2 out, domestic violence. Right. For many years they have been. So then, offenders started getting, again, using the example of a man, they started getting smarter, like using more emotional mistreatment, emotional manipulation. And if that could prompt a physical response, then they're the victim. That just proves to them that all the emotional behavior, all the manipulation was valid. It's like, oh, you just proved it. You just attacked me. You proved that, that's emotional. And what you did is physical. Physical is worse.
Right.
But arguably, the emotional stuff is way worse because it's way longer lasting.
Right.
Yeah, well, but again, they're looking at what the police are going to do. Like back then, when we see this pivot, the police still didn't care about emotional content. It was all the physical content that mattered. Did you touch them? No. Then that's it. It's like, how they treat car accidents. If somebody soars into a lane and somebody avoids them, that person complains. Did the car make contact? No. But nothing happened, which is ridiculous. Right? If you get run off the road, that's bad. But for many years, the police wouldn't bother to even investigate those type of things without contact, physical contact. And, maybe it was the same logic from these calls with the domestic stuff. But I think that's the pattern developed, right? You have somebody who's very emotionally manipulative. They can gaslight the other individual. They can prompt a violent response. But again, in this particular situation, August 12th, I don't get the impression that Brian wanted anyone arrested.
I don't either. Now, then it's interesting that this brings us into the 911 call because the transcript of that was released. And one of the things you were just talking about was kind of the way things used to be observed. And for a long time, there was, and I think it's changed or in the process of changing, that very often the general public would look the other way if a woman was physically attacking a man, but not the other way around. And this is something I actually witnessed myself in person in my early 20s, was a woman who was easily 50 to 60 pounds and 5 inches taller than the person she was going after. They were dating at the time. And she full on fists balled up, punching this guy in the back. And people in the corner were just, they were laughing, like hysterically laughing. But as soon as he kind of like swatted at her to try and create distance to stop getting punched in the back, they all leapt over and grabbed him and threw him down on the ground and like, don't ever hit a woman. And it's like, clearly she's the aggressor in that situation. How are you? And I was trying to find a way to interject myself while she was doing the punching without getting punched myself. And I'm not a police officer, never have been. So like, it's not my job, but I knew them both and I was trying to get them separated. But it was really, that struck me even then as kind of a hypocritical societal reaction to, like, oh, we just laugh because, it's a woman doing this to a man. But as soon as he kind of tries to defend himself physically, we're in there and on it. And the 911 call says that Brian slapped her and then hit her again. And both Gabby and Brian said that she was attacking him and physically making contact with him. And there's physical evidence of that. So again, I think there's manipulation, the escalation of emotional states on both sides. I think that he probably did slap her, but I think initially it wasn't a slap. It was kind of a push away. And then she comes at him and he slaps her to push her away, to get her away. But the 911 caller, I think, might have had a little bit of that residual, oh, he hit her. And kind of either didn't actually see her hitting him or completely didn't mention it.
I think what strikes me about the 911 call is how concerned that citizen was. Like something they saw, I think it was a he, Christopher, I believe, right? Something he saw was very alarming. And you would think, to call the police, usually that's a high threshold. Usually, not always, but usually people don't call the police for kind of minuscule type requests or moderate things. I know there's stories of people like calling the police and ordering pizza and things like that and asking for a ride. But usually people, citizens in the normal range of behavior would be like, I have to see something pretty alarming. And whatever he saw was alarming. Yeah.
There's one funny 911 call I heard from a woman who was drunk in public. An officer responded, gave her a warning because her friend was there, said, take her home, get her sobered up. Friend took her home. She picks up the phone, calls 911, and asks the dispatcher, can you give me the number of the officer who responded? As I'd like to ask him out on a date. It's like the 911 dispatcher was like, no, that's not what 911 is for. And we're not a dating service. I can't give you that information. And you need to hang up right now unless this is an emergency. And she was still like, no, but it's emergency. I need his number.
Oh my gosh.
So it was so ridiculous. But drunk people often do that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that Christopher did see something that really impacted him. I don't know, what happened in that parking lot. I know that what both Gabby and Brian said on the police video, and that there appears to be physical injuries to Brian. So that appears to be kind of this part of the story. Now, it's possible that he fell down and got banged up that way, and then manipulated her into thinking that she smacked him around a little bit, but I don't think so. I think it was definitely an escalation of emotional state throughout that whole thing, which may have started 9 o'clock in the morning when they stopped at the co-op to get their coffee and just escalated throughout the day.
Yeah. So, and you see, again, that was August 12th. And on August 27th, when the incident happened in that restaurant, we see, again, inability to maintain mood regulation, to regulate mood. So this isn't like a one-time thing, like having a bad day. This was their relationship, it would seem. It was tumultuous at best.
There was another, and there's been a lot of talk about the van life and the impact of that on one's mental health or just their emotional state, things like that. And, potential for loneliness. We kind of alluded to this in the first video as well. Loneliness, and, you're bound to get annoyed with this other person. You're bound to need some space from this person. And you're in a small van traveling long distances, not a whole lot of places to go, not necessarily a whole lot of other people to talk to. And in the middle of that, they're trying to put on a good face for these videos and pictures that they're putting out. So I think there's probably a pretty great potential there, more than in normal situations, for them to kind of bury these issues, right? And not talk through any issues they're having. And just let's put on a good face. We got to get these pictures out. We got to get these videos out and present a certain look for our fans, right? So, and that in the body cam video, Brian kept saying, or Gabby kept saying that Brian kept telling her to calm down and everything. And if there's one way to make somebody more mad at you that's upset, tell them to calm down, right?
Oh, yeah. In the history of telling people to calm down, the one thing that has never worked has been telling you to calm down.
So I imagine that it was probably a lot of, it's possible that it was a lot of that. Just, calm down, calm down. We got to take these pictures. We got to take these videos. And therefore nothing was ever really worked on, right? They never really, not a great environment to do that anyway, but it seems like it could play a major part in that escalation of whatever was going on between them. Just being in the same spot all the time, next to each other, nothing's getting fixed or solved or worked on or talked about, but let's just keep going, and anger builds and so forth. Seems like it could easily be a recipe for disaster being in a situation like that.
Yeah, it would seem like a van trip from hell, what they were doing.
Yeah.
And the way the social media influencer people do it, I mean, you never really see what's going on, right? It's an image that they project, which is how life works. I mean, it's not, I don't blame them for that, but it's phony, right? It's, look at us, we're ideal, the narcissistic ideal, right? The theoretical, desire of, not that they were narcissists, but that's the ideal you see, right? It's like, you have this perfect image, you have the perfect life in a van, perfect presentation. And then something happens that kind of shatters that. And then you see a lot of backpedaling. Oh, behind the cameras, things are rough. People have to explain. There's been a few times where people have left, like they didn't take edits out. And you'll see kind of like them getting angry. Like you ever hear of the Ace family? It's a YouTube channel. I think it's like 20 million subscribers, a massive channel.
Okay.
It's something like that. It's a lot. It's many, I think it's tens of millions. And it's this guy, Austin McBroom, I think is the guy. And on one video, like clearly it was a part they're going to edit out. He's like getting angry and like, I forget what he's doing, but like something like positioning people or, do this. And people got really upset. And then they're like, the couple was like, well, behind the scenes, we're people, something like that, paraphrase. Right. But yeah, I mean, it's an inauthentic way to live, because if there's a production, that's one thing. It's like, we're going to produce something about something else. But the idea of these social media influencers is that they're the product, right? Their perfect ideal life is the product that people are supposed to consume.
Yeah.
But no one can meet that ideal.
Right.
That's standard. That's impossible. And I mean, obviously they had dreams, like they had the van and they posted a lot, like they were trying to build it up, but they didn't have the fundamental structure to build that type of business. It's just chaos.
Yeah. Well, it's just like us. Before we start recording, we're literally in fist fights. And we're like, hold on, stop, sit down.
Thumbtacks everywhere.
It is surprising that these things stay up with just the knockdown drag-outs.
Sometimes we use the microphones and just bashing each other. It gets intense. But then, we just snap our fingers and everyone sits down.
Jeff has been stabbed multiple times with the syringe.
The dull syringe. It hurts, I'll tell you.
Yeah, so it's not always pretty behind the scenes, right, of anything. And I think, that includes relationships. I think that's really one of the stories of Gabby and Brian. I mean, this will be analyzed, I'm sure, extensively for many years. I picture this, like I said, being a Netflix documentary someday.
Eventually.
Yeah. But I think what the story that'll come out, I mean, obviously, the tragedy, loss of life, and kind of the more obvious aspects. But I think the behind-the-scenes story is the relationship, this poisonous relationship that was not going well. But they clearly both at some point wanted it to work out.
Right.
As I understand it, they were intending to get married. Mm-hmm. It's frightening.
Yeah, I think one of the sources I read early on when investigating this case or looking into the case was that they had intended on getting married in 2020, but that COVID had, squashed their plans of having a big wedding. And so the money that they had put together actually went into fixing up the van and towards this trip.
Okay.
So clearly they both said that they were still engaged to the police.
Right.
And that they loved each other. So
not engaged to the police.
No,
they said to the police. To the police.
Yes, they spoke to the police saying that they were engaged.
That might have been a weird twist. Turns out they were engaged to the police.
It could have been.
Yeah.
A little conflict of interest, right?
Yeah. Once the body cams got turned off, there, somebody was down on one knee, and
well, see, that's what
the speculation. The speculation is who got down on their knee. Was it the police officer proposing to them, or did they propose to the police officers?
That's the question, right? I mean, that's what you're saying. Behind the cameras, everything's different.
Everything's
right?
different.
Relationships are all different. Different people are engaged. It can get crazy.
No, right. To clarify, though, they told the police that they were still engaged.
I think there's
to
been.
each other.
I don't know if this is. I didn't see this, but in one place, it might be more than one. But I think there's some type of investigation now going into the stop.
Yeah.
The Moab City police chief or somebody is calling for patience as they investigate.
Right. Because there were a lot of people saying the police screwed up on this one, that somebody should have been arrested at that point, and it might have stopped Gabby from being killed. And
it may have.
I think a lot of people are like, Brian should have been arrested at that point. And well, at that point, they were looking at him as the victim.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been him. But it still might have prevented her death.
And in the light of the 911 call, a lot of people are saying, well, clearly she was the victim. And
yeah,
it is a difficult thing to balance now that we know Gabby is dead, to try and say, okay, this is the evidence and the truth of what we know so far, with the idea that she's dead. A lot of times we want to kind of clear the person who's dead of any kind of wrongdoing or badness, because we want to remember them fondly, and I think that her family will remember her fondly.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't dismiss the fact that she played a role in what happened on the 12th.
Right, in that specific incident.
Incident.
I think that this is interesting with the police, right? So when we first watched the hour and 17-minute body cam thing, we didn't know that Gabby was dead, although
we suspected.
I'd say strongly suspected. But it was one of these things where I looked at it and thought the police did okay. Clearly the outcome was terrible, and you don't want to ever celebrate what somebody did when the outcome was terrible. But I don't know how they could have known they were looking at potentially a murder case at that time. That happened presumably a few weeks after. They did separate them. They did keep them there for over an hour. They did, I think the one police officer drove Brian to the hotel,
right,
and was still engaging him. They're talking about the beauty of Utah or something. I mean, they seem like they did a fairly good job. And now they're being investigated as if they didn't prevent a murder. I don't know how they could have known that.
And there have been reports from the one female officer who was on the scene says that she went and told Gabby, she said, this seems like a pretty toxic relationship. You should think about cutting cords.
Well, that's the solution, right? She's absolutely right. Mm-hmm. But see, this is the problem. In these relationships, nobody wants to let go.
No.
Right? They're dependent, codependent, and there's this just cycle where, this is the thing, right? You can never get in between people who are lovers or haters, right? Because they're both at the same time. And the police know this, right? You don't want to get in between them because you'll try to help one, the other one will stab you. Mm-hmm. It's this terrible magnetism, this magnetism from hell that keeps these couples together. And the answer really is, I think, for many people, just find another partner. Sometimes you're just not compatible, or the person's dangerous, or whatever, right? The chemistry is caustic. And, therapy and all, and we're big fans of therapy, but for some couples...
Oh, yeah, no, there have been there have been several couples that I've worked with where it's just like, okay, you're paying me, you're here. I want to be, it's your room. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. But honestly, you guys should not be together. Like, and I want to say that so badly sometimes. Right. I'm like, this is clearly an indication of why you shouldn't be together. But yeah, this isn't, that's not like, I'm not going to order you. I'm not going to prescribe you break up. Yeah. But I do ask questions like, what keeps you together? Mm-hmm. And in some cases, it's about safety. For some, especially when there's super abuse cases, like it's not as simple as, oh, I could just break up with him and go elsewhere. It's safety, and I point out to people sometimes that in any relationship, be it a 20-year, 50-year long relationship or a 2-minute long relationship between two people at a bus stop, there is responsibility on both sides for how that relationship goes. And sometimes, like in the case of abuse, the responsibility of the victim of abuse is to maintain their safety. And sometimes that means staying until they can make sure that it's safe for them to leave. Right. And unfortunately, that means continuing the status quo sometimes. And that is where their responsibility lies. If it was easy to just up and leave and they stayed, that's kind of at a certain point you say, well, that's on them. But it's never as easy as that.
The logistics of life makes relationships something we become dependent on, like just financially, for shelter, for food, not just the romantic components and the companionship. So yeah, you can't look at somebody in a living together in an apartment and say, well, you just leave. You got a car, you got feet, go. It's not that simple. How am I going to eat tonight? How am I going to shower? I have to go to work. Like, there's just massive logistical hurdles to get past.
And it gets way worse when there are kids involved.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. We'll get into that. I mean, it becomes, for some people, it really does become impossible because they don't want to abandon the kids because they're afraid something's going to happen to them.
Right. And seeing the kids as well is a huge undertaking. I want to see the child more. No, I want to see the child more.
Right. And child support, the courts, I mean, involving them, which is necessary. It makes things so much worse because they're horrible. The visitation centers and dehumanizing everybody. But I think it's just a response to just how terrible people are to each other.
And it's another one of those things. Like sometimes it's children are used as a manipulation. Yeah. It's like if you walk out that door, you'll never see those kids again. Mm-hmm. Even if objectively you can say, well, the person walking out the door is clearly going to be the better parent and going to get custody, it's still a chance that person's not willing to take. So
the threat of that is often enough to be like, right, yeah, you're right.
So the question that often comes up, especially from like prosecutors or investigators, is, well, if it was so bad, why didn't they just leave? Mm-hmm. And these are the reasons. Like, it's not that easy. They have a responsibility to maintain their own safety. If there's kids involved, they have the responsibility to maintain the safety of their child, which is where I really fall into like the battered spouse defense is as accurate.
It's legitimate.
As a legitimate thing, because you can get to the point where you've been battered to thinking, battered enough emotionally or physically or both into believing, I can't leave this situation and be safe. Mm-hmm. I have to end this situation to be safe. I have to end this person's life in order to be safe. And it's not as simple as walking away. I mean, that's one of the things we learned becoming counselors is like, don't just tell an abuse victim, oh yeah, get out of there. Like, you have to make a plan for safety.
They already thought of that.
Safe extraction. Yeah. They've already thought about that.
If it was that easy, they'd have already done it. And oftentimes everything after they leave is so much worse that they're like, why didn't I just stay? I'd rather be in an abusive relationship than not have any money or have to split the time that I see my child or be sad and lonely all the time, even though he was abusive or the partner was abusive, still with someone. Now I'm all lonely. And that's a lot to work through. Mm-hmm. That's a whole lot. You've spent potentially years with this person and now you're alone, right? And that's a lot to work through. And of course it's necessary to stand up for yourself, right? And standing up to abuse is incredible, but there are a lot of logistical things, and there's a lot of things that you have to plan for, and there's a lot of things that you have to realize you're going to experience some negative things even after you leave. Yeah, the abuse won't be happening anymore, but there's going to be a lot of things that'll feel very negative to you. You'll have to work through it, and it's going to be difficult, but you'll have stood up to the abuse. You'll have ended that cycle of abuse potentially, and so there's obviously a lot of positives to it too, but it's such a tangled, murky situation that it's no wonder that it's difficult for someone to leave. So much to think about, so much to consider, so much to plan for, and so much to deal with emotionally.
And the more codependent it is, the more toxic it is, the more likely it is to be an unwanted leaving. Like, I don't want to leave. And I've asked the question before, like, why don't you leave this situation? It's clearly codependent. It's clearly toxic. You've said as much in these sessions. What keeps you there? And the response is almost always, well, because I love them. Mm-hmm. It's like,
yeah, which can reach a delusional level, right? Or just, sometimes like ask people like, let's talk about your understanding of love, right? Like, let's just go through. And sometimes what you find out is it is quite perverted, right? They don't understand what that means. Or they think that you can have kind of contradictory pieces and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? He can love me even though he tried to stab me to death. Right? Oh, well, those coexist in the same space. Okay. Right? But to some people they do.
Right.
And some people, the offender actually makes it seem like the stabbing or whatever proves their love.
Right.
I really care about you. That's why I act out like this.
That's why I need to put you in your place. That's why I need to help you understand why your behavior is so bad. That's why I hit you, because you deserve it, or whatever they might say.
And that's the gaslighting side of things. That's the I'm making it your fault, and somehow I'm making it about how much I love you. And if it wasn't your fault, this wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly how people can justify doing those things to other human beings.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
everybody gets delusional, and maybe not technically, like clinically delusional, but everybody believes things that are simply not founded on any evidence. Yeah. And those relationships, a lot of emotion and a lot of investment a relationship becomes an institution. And institutions are historically very difficult to destroy, even if they're evil and maladaptive.
Yeah. So going back to the officer, the officers there did a great job de-escalating things, right? Gabby was obviously very emotional, and they talked very nicely with her and separated them, of course, and they weren't judgmental of anything, and they just tried to de-escalate things, calm things down. And that was a nice tone, appropriate for Gabby, I think. And so there's some criticism that they weren't, that they were maybe a little bit too nice to Brian, or too accommodating, perhaps. And much to your point, Dr. Grande, I imagine that most situations like that don't result in a whole lot of anything. All right, they're mad at each other, they need to take a break or whatever, and that's it. I imagine that most situations just end in that. But of course, those ones that don't, the ones where the behavior or the aggression, fighting, physical, anything, the situations where that escalates, right? How are the officers going to know that? And they've got to make a judgment call. Am I going to try to help these people just kind of take a break from each other? Am I going to, kind of put a little bit more pressure on? And it's a tough call to make. Now, of course, Brian was, he wasn't, neither of their emotions were matching, right? Gabby was very, very emotional. Brian was not at all. Does that mean that Brian did something wrong? It could have. It could have not. And how are they going to make that judgment call in that moment just based on how he's presenting himself? Maybe he is just generally more calm. They have no idea. They don't know the guy. And that's the tough thing about walking into a situation like that with no background information, no knowledge of these people. They have to make a judgment call. And sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're right. In this situation, of course, later on we would see that Gabby dies, gets murdered. And so you could easily make the argument now, well, they were wrong. They made the wrong judgment call. Now we can say that with the information we have now, but just watching that body cam footage, could you make that call? Of course, some people, there's a large number of people that would say, there's indication here that Brian was manipulative, and you could see it, right, with the way he was acting, the way he was talking to the police. And I think that's probably true. You could read into that for sure. But they had to deal with the facts that they knew at that moment. And so for that reason, I don't know how much fault could be put on those officers. They try to de-escalate a situation. I don't know if they see that situation often, but if they do, it probably doesn't lead to a whole lot of anything. So I'm with the people, though, that are able to read into or want to read more into Brian's behavior there. I think there is a lot to be said about his behavior. Not that the officers maybe picked up on that at the moment or could have, but I think it does give an indication about the kind of behavior that we might expect to see from Brian, and we did see later with all the aggression and the anger and things like that. But it was a tough call, and I don't know that the police could have really done anything differently.
Right. It's not like Brian went over to the back of the van and like opened it up and went, yeah, you guys, we'll be fine.
Right.
Right. He wasn't like, oh, has anybody seen my knife sharpener around? Like, no? Okay. Sorry. Didn't mean to bring that up during the police interview. And I can understand to a point where Gabby was upset. And we talked about anxiety quite a bit in the last video. And one of the things, big things about panic attacks, which it could have been, is that they sharp increase, really rapid increase to a high state of anxiety, and then a long time to taper off. It can take hours for someone to come down from a panic attack. And if she was still on the way down from a panic attack, it's easy to see how she was in the state that she was in. And Brian was calm, but we say many times with investigators, that's not always an indication of anything. Because investigators are always like, they seem a little bit too calm. Like when we clearly know that somebody's innocent, right? Michael Morton, right? Mm-hmm. And very much, he was too calm. Like, but, okay. Yeah. But he factually didn't do it. Right? So the he was too calm or didn't react the way I expect him to is kind of an after the fact justification very often. And I don't know. I think that maybe he was trying to remain calm because he was talking to the police. I've been there on both sides of that when talking to police, because my life rule number one is don't go to prison. Mm-hmm. Number one, don't go to prison. So I've been in just casual conversation with police officers and having my heart rate go up a little bit. like I'm not in a situation where I'm being investigated and my heart. We're talking about just stuff, and my heart's going because I'm like, this is a cop. They're on duty. They're in uniform.
Wait, did I do something wrong?
Did I do something wrong that I don't remember? Yeah, exactly.
No, they're going to find me out. And I didn't even do anything.
Exactly. Yeah, I apologize for speeding ever.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I've also been in situations where I had to remain calm because I was talking to a police officer, even though I didn't really feel like being calm at that moment. Mm. After a car collision, it's like okay. I got to be calm because I got to give information to this officer, but on the inside, I'm like, oh crap, my car, and I'm about I want to break down, mm-hmm. but I can't. I've got to stay stable. So I can see both sides of the reactions from both Gabby and Brian from multiple angles, and again, that video, I don't see much more the police could have done.
No,
in that situation. Especially since neither one of them was willing to press charges against the other one.
Yeah, well, we got to remember too. I mean, these officers are agents of the state, right? They work for the government, and we limit what the government can do because when we don't, it leads to other problems, right? So you don't want officers that can just do anything and ship people back home and whatever people are saying they should have done. Oh, they should have put her on a plane. With what magic money? Like what? That's taxpayer dollars. It
was hard enough for them to get the hotel for Brian.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
That was a long process for them. Yeah,
yeah. It's not simple, and I don't think we'd want police with a tremendous amount of say in mental health issues. But I think this speaks to the point of people that advocate for mental health clinicians being in certain police encounters. Not all of them, right? Not bank robberies. Right? Not a kidnapping progress.
I don't think I would want to respond to a bank robbery with a police officer.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Like, I'm going to wait in the car and hide. You go. Have fun. But But like with domestic violence type situations, that seems appropriate to have a mental health clinician. And I think there's certainly some big opportunities in that stop that a clinician would have picked up on. Yeah. Like, first of all, this was probably something chronic and not just because they were in Moab, Utah. Yeah. Right? This was woven into their personality or into their behavior with a degree of chronicity. And, I think probably more conversations to both of them, like, why don't you end this trip? Why don't you, let's call your parents. Let's see if they can get a plane ticket for you. Just go back to your corner, so to speak, not just for the night. At least they did that, which was very smart. But this needed more, and I don't think the officers really had, you can't expect them to have picked up on those things. And again, we know that she's dead, so that's going to really color how we see things. Now, I actually think they did better than I thought they would have.
Yeah. They didn't shoot anybody.
Right.
But then again, they were both white, so I could get into the systemic racism of how police officers respond to certain situations, but
they are a little gun happy with minorities for sure. Yeah.
But the thing I wanted to comment was on speaking of like having counselors responding with police officers. The state of Delaware in Newcastle County Police Department actually is working on putting that together. I think they have one unit right now in their behavioral health unit that is a non-uniformed officer and a counselor who ride in a car and respond to things that are deemed emotional responses, like domestic disturbances, certain substance use cases, problematic behaviors, like somebody standing in the middle of an intersection screaming their head off at motorists as they're wandering by, wearing nothing but underwear and boots. It's something that actually did happen in the state of Delaware, Salem Church Road and Route 40. Just somebody standing there. I heard that story from a police officer who actually was in the CMHC program.
Oh, how about that?
A while back. Had a very same name as a famous actress.
I think I know who you mean. but yeah, I mean, certainly I can see opportunities for mental health clinicians where it'd be relatively safe and beneficial for them to be there. But the idea, some people have said, no, just only send clinicians, right? We've seen this argument. No guns, no training, no body armor. Like, that just seems like you're asking people to get killed.
I think it's why in Delaware, it's why it's a non-uniformed officer, because sending a uniformed officer can escalate things.
Yeah.
Sometimes people see that uniform and, oh my God. But a non-uniformed officer can be there to help protect the clinician. And I think it'd be best if I had a clinician and like a social worker who did resource gathering. Mm-hmm. You can say, okay, we can get you resources on this, that, and the other. I know who to call it, how to call. While the clinician is kind of talking a person down and listening and trying to help with pinpointing some mental health issues to get them to go to someplace. And the police officer is just there to kind of protect.
Mm-hmm. Just keep things safe. That's all they really need to do in that. And, we don't need people to get arrested randomly. Mm-hmm. Just let the clinician do the job, again, with the appropriate type of call. That's the key.
Rethinking how they all use their training and their strengths the best in a situation like that, and not veer over into anybody else's lane, but just do what they're trained to do, and they have other people to do what they're trained to do as well.
Yeah. So, that's certainly, I think this case does offer some support to that type of program. And I think we'll see that in more and more places. Yeah. Many, unfortunately, fortunately, most of these situations don't end up in homicide. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, it does happen. And, what you have is officers where they can't really over-respond. They can't put everybody in jail and hope they're preventing a murder, because most of the time they're not.
Right.
They're just disrupting people's lives. It's a balance, right? It's tough. I think the officers are in a tough spot, impossible spot, as it turns out. We now know.
Right.
I think one of the problems that people ran into, they did run into in the state of Delaware. They had to do this pilot program twice, like once in Sussex and then once up in Newcastle, was initially they saw a decrease in number of prosecutions and cases being brought forward, like drastic drop in that. And people were like, "What? That's bad. Mm-hmm. That's bad. Like, you shouldn't see it." But then, like, months later, It was, oh, we saw a reduction in criminality in the area. When people were being responded to from a mental health standpoint and treated appropriately and getting the help they needed, they weren't being arrested and put into the system.
Yep.
And that's a very important thing.
One of the things that's tricky, and one of the things I've seen a few times in my clinical work, different places, is that police are accustomed to being threatened. They're accustomed to people being dangerous. Mental health professionals are not. Right? So just like we criticize the police and say, they're not sensitive enough, they could argue that we're too sensitive with fear response. And I've seen it many times. I've seen people that are clearly in a mental health crisis. That's why they're acting out. That's why they're throwing objects, whatever. And everybody calls the police. Clinicians call the police. And save me from this person. I'm like, they're not going to hurt you. Right? They're upset. They're responding to being upset. Yes, they shouldn't be, whatever, throwing things, kicking objects, whatever. But that's it's a far cry from pulling out a knife or whatever. So I think there's training not just for the police, there's training for clinicians that we get involved in this too. Like to not overreact. Sometimes I think counselors are actually the worst for overreacting to violence. Because we always say, you can't be violent. That's the line. But in the real world, people are going to be violent. Do they all go to jail? For putting their hand through a wall, whatever? They're going to go to jail for that? I mean, at some point, you do have to say physical expression of anger is normal.
Right.
Now you could draw the line somewhere else. Like if you strike somebody, that's it. That's a lot different. But even kind of the animated, people getting excited sitting in a chair, I've seen counselors just totally lose it with that. Like just somebody who's just very upset and moving their hands, and they're running out like, call 911. Really? Now, clinicians in hospitals, they'd be an exception.
Yeah.
They are used to that.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw a bunch of that when I was working inpatient. Like clients would, and to a point, these are people in a lot of pain because they're detoxing off of substances and they're trying to touch for the first time maybe some deep-seated trauma or terrible memories and things. And they get very, very overwhelmed emotionally, physically, and they will lash out. And I had to kind of talk our clinical director several times out of tossing somebody out of the program because they put their fist up to a brick wall. Right? They punched a brick wall and did more damage to their hand than the wall. And it was like, nope, they threw a punch. They're out of here. It's violence. I'm like they're not violent. They were in a crisis.
Did the wall file a complaint?
The wall didn't file a complaint. They're like, one of the techs had to wash blood off the wall. I'm like, so?
Was it the blood from the wall?
It was the client's blood. And I really had to stress, look, the client was in an overwhelmed state, and they're not in that state. Really, they could get violent with other people. I'm like, they could, but they're not likely to.
Yeah, because it still shows judgment, right? They're attacking something that obviously is inanimate,
right?
And I think that's a big difference. Just like being animated, just like moving your hands around and sitting up out of a chair. That doesn't mean that they're going to physically attack somebody.
And that's probably why they had brick walls, because maybe that's the best way to build it. But also, they probably expected that somebody was going to hit a wall, run into a wall, do something that's going to that could damage drywall or something like that. So, hey, let's get brick walls. You do the same thing. I worked at an alternative school, and they had rooms for the students to calm down, right? And the walls in that room were reinforced because we know the kids are going to be hitting the walls. And for some of them, they just needed to do that for a little bit. For some of them, they really were angry and needed to calm down and everything. But you have environments like that just so someone in a state like that, especially detox or something where they're clearly kind of out of control at that moment because they're dealing with a lot of things or maybe substances were involved, they might need an environment like that. And they might need to just express their anger by hitting a wall or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, is it the kind of bricks that bleed? Is it kind of bricks that are going to scream because they're hurt now or something like that? It's a brick wall. And like you said, more damage to their hand than anything else.
If the bricks
definitely on them. If the bricks could talk.
The bricks could talk. Yeah. I worked in an alternative school as well when I was much younger before I had any kind of degree. And they had a timeout room. And the walls from floor to ceiling were covered in carpet. And that was because they knew the kids were going to kick and throw and do things.
Yeah.
So having that kind of environment would be great. I have prescribed people, physical aggression before. If you have high amounts of anger, punch a pillow, punch your bed, punch something soft. Don't punch the wall. Don't do something like that. I've had a client in my office who was like, "I'm going to punch this pillow right now." I'm like, "You do that. You punch that pillow," and had him punch it, and it to relieve some aggression, to relieve some of that anger, and it helped. And there's a thing, break therapy, right? You go to a break room, you have all sorts of breakable stuff, and you get 5 minutes with a baseball bat or a sledgehammer. Just break everything you can break, and just to let it out. Let that release, because very often anger comes with a physical, it's part of the anxiety reaction that comes up. The physical need to release physical energy is very necessary sometimes, but we don't want to address it. We don't want to direct it towards people,
Right.
and hopefully not at breakable objects. But to your point, where I work, we have panic buttons in every room. I don't think they've ever been pushed. They've been up there for like 2 months, but in the year prior to that the offices have been open, we've had the police called exactly once to the site, and that was actually because of a clinician who had been fired.
Go figure, right?
Yeah. Well,
We're worried about the clients.
It wasn't because of a client or anything. It was because a clinician who had been fired had come to the office and wasn't supposed to be there.
I think what counselors do, and I understand the struggle, is they want to follow their own advice. Like they tell people, don't tolerate violence, don't tolerate aggression, put up boundaries. And yet, when that same thing happens to them, when they feel there's a boundary being crossed, they react strongly. Like it's actually consistent with the advice they're giving. It's not always helpful. If you're safe, you have to make sure you're safe. That's the key, right? So you can work with those expressions. But yeah, if you're too sensitive on that, I can see that being problematic.
I am of the opinion that most of our clinicians should work inpatient for at least a year.
Toughen them up.
Because it will, whether it's in a rehab or in a crisis center or just a mental health inpatient facility somewhere, it'll toughen you up real quick, because people in all sorts of crisis situations, they'll snap out. I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten screamed at in my face, and pretty laid back person. I don't generally do things to get screamed at, but I've been, people screamed in my face, and I don't take it as a personal attack against me as a person. Mm-hmm. It's because of the state of mind that they're in.
Yeah. A lot of the times what I notice is, unless you're dealing with psychosis or something, what they want is for you to understand that they're serious. Mm-hmm. So what they do, they go different places. They go different places in the public, stores and hospitals or bus stops, and they don't get taken seriously, and they escalate. Right, until somebody pays attention. And then they use the same strategy when they come in for mental health treatment, not realizing that we don't need that. We'll take them seriously without that. Yeah. And I think, working with the same person, I wouldn't tolerate that repeatedly. Mm-hmm. I'm saying in the first time you meet somebody, you don't know them, they don't know you. I've seen counselors massively overreact to inanimate object violence or really minor stuff.
Yeah.
Really minor. Nothing that could have been harmful, even if it was directed at a person. Now, again, if they're coming in for their 50th appointment and they're throwing a shoe across the room, I'm going to have something to say, right? There's a limit to, we have to work on this. But initially, that first impression is important. You want to demonstrate that you're there to help. Mm-hmm. And calling the police on the first visit, which I've seen several times, is usually a way to cause problems. I also see people overreacting with the mandated reporting thing. I've seen that, which gets into a very dicey area.
Yeah.
Person comes in with a kid, and you observe some behaviors that don't seem healthy, and then somebody gets it in their mind that this is a mandated reporting thing, even though there's nothing to reach that level. Mm-hmm. But clinicians, they overreact. They don't know where to draw the line.
Yeah.
And I get it. You want to report everything that's reportable. It's mandated. But you don't want to see things that aren't there.
Right. Read into things that just aren't there.
Yeah. What evidence do you have that there's some type of harm? Mm-hmm. Well, there was a mean scowl, and the mother grabbed the boy's hand. Okay, did she crush the boy's hand? What? Just
she have spikes in her hand?
Yeah,
or
like
something?
what are we talking about? You know,
Usually when you're writing the details about or calling the details in, depending on how you do it, it's usually when you realize, like, maybe both ways, but usually when you realize, you know what, maybe there aren't enough details here for me to even realize what was going on. Maybe I saw something, thought I saw something that wasn't actually there. Or maybe I'm overthinking this or something. Or you realize, wait a minute, this was a little bit worse than I thought now that I'm actually processing through these details. So just that process of writing out or calling in the report makes you realize, like, I gotta be really aware of what actually happened, what I actually saw, and think through this one. Is this something that I'm overreacting? Is this something I'm underreacting? Or is this something that maybe doesn't even need a report at all? At the same time, it's not our job to decide what rises to that level of something that needs to be investigated. But there's got to be a threshold for us to realize, like, do I need to go through this and possibly disrupt somebody's life that didn't really need that to begin with? Maybe that's something that can be dealt with, in the therapy office as well, perhaps.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed with the counseling profession is that the reactions of two different professionals, right, two different counselors, say, can be very different to the same situation. I've seen some extremes that are just unbelievable, right, where one clinician's ready to call the police and have somebody arrested, and another clinician's like half asleep. Like, yeah, that's normal. I've seen it all the time. Like, no, and maybe they're both wrong, right? But you don't see a standard. If somebody's like a carpenter and they come to fix, something that's broken in a house, like a deck, like a railing on a deck, they're probably going to agree when that deck railing's broken. Like, oh yeah, that's broken, or that's not.
Right.
You're not going to have 5 carpenters say, well, I think it's broken, and 5 say, no, it's fine, you can use it. But with counselors, you get that wide dispersal of opinions. And it's really actually pretty scary how unregulated it seems. Like, we have rules, but the way we choose to follow them is very different.
We also don't get to decide when clients are broken, though.
Right.
Like, the clients come to us for a reason, and sometimes the reason is that they're being told they have to by courts or parents, and they don't see that there's anything wrong. So, even if they're snapping out in the middle of the appointment, we don't get to tell them, like, hey, you're crazy. Like, you're insane right now. Stop this. Like, sometimes I can say, that's pushing a boundary. I'm going to have to say, stop. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not appropriate in this situation. But to say, oh, these people are broken, or this situation is broken, like, that's where I'm like, I'm not sure that that's an appropriate thing for us to do. But I can say, like, if this is going to be endangering me or anybody else in my office, that's when I want to hit that panic button. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I've never had that issue at these offices. There were a couple of times where I did have to have clients at the inpatient locations separated.
Well, you can, those environments are pretty rough.
Yeah.
I mean, you expect that. in those locations, I mean, people come out with really severe pathology and a history of being disruptive. Mm-hmm. So, as far as updates on the case of Gabby Petito, we talked about a few. We talked about the incident at the restaurant, the body cam footage, which we already talked about last time, and the van door. There was one incident. I mean, it's hardly worth reporting. I just want to mention because I think it speaks to the media coverage. There was a false report of a gunshot at the Laundrie home in wherever in Florida that is. Northport, Florida. And the police said there's no evidence that anybody fired a gun. So I just think it speaks to how sensitive and ramped up the situation is, where, of course, that could have just been somebody calling in, like, to be destructive, right? Just, it was an anonymous tip.
It could be somebody trying to swat them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is a thing where people call in a thing like that, hoping for a SWAT response on the house, which actually has been a very dangerous thing, has resulted in some deaths.
Yeah, and a serious crime that they will definitely prosecute.
Yeah.
So that happened today, right? September 24th.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing came of it. But, what you see with the coverage is, like, those reporters are just all over that neighborhood. Yeah. Can you imagine living in that neighborhood? Now what are you going to do? Like, you can't even sell your house until this whole thing resolves.
Right. You barely leave your driveway, I imagine. People all over. And
there's yellow tape everywhere. Like, just, I guess, the police have put up to mark off where the reporters can come up to. And it's the whole area is hijacked by this story. And I think that brings us pretty well current.
There's a few more in August.
Okay.
The hitchhiking
Right.
examples.
There's a couple of those, right?
So,
a couple of hitchhikers.
So August, there was one, somebody reported seeing a white van and a man acting weird on August 26th, 27th, and maybe on the 28th. So I don't know that there's any more details than that. But and then after that, so there was 2 hitchhiking reports. So first one was, again, this was another TikTok video. They alerted police and or the FBI, but there's also a video associated with this, or videos, I think there was multiple, reported that they picked up Brian on August 29th. All right, so the previous one we saw was August 27th. Now we're seeing on the 29th. Picked him up. It was before 6 o'clock. He was hitchhiking alone. He said that his fiance was in their van working on a video, I believe, and he also said that he had been camping for multiple days, and I believe he said that all he had was a tarp to sleep on. Now, the people who gave him the ride reported that he didn't look like he had been camping for days. Didn't look dirty, as if he hadn't showered. Didn't smell as if he hadn't showered or had been outside for days. It didn't seem like the backpack that he had was very full of things. Like you might expect that he might have some kind of gear to help him survive, or food, or things like that. So it seemed odd to them. So give him a ride, and he had offered him $200 for this short ride. Now, we've heard before that he would indicate that he didn't have much money. So offering $200 for a short ride seems excessive, but also definitely, given that he indicated he didn't have much money, like on the body cam footage. But most significantly, perhaps, is that he thought that they were going to, they said they were going to Jackson. And once they clarified they were going to Jackson Hole, they said that he freaked out. He demanded that he get out of the vehicle right then. So they let him out. Thought it was really strange. So reportedly he got picked up pretty shortly after that. So this is around 6:15. They would say that according to, I don't know if it was according to the video, the people who picked him up, or just the internet in general, but people have said that was shortly after he got out of the vehicle from the previous time. So this person brought him to the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. This is right near where Gabby's body would eventually be found. So it's unclear to me, maybe you guys have more information on this, unclear to me why them going to Jackson Hole was such a big deal to Brian. Maybe we don't know this right now, but if it's, I tried looking at a map to see if these areas were close to each other, and they are, but not right, like, I guess they're right next to each other, but I don't see the connection there. So I wonder maybe if something happened to Gabby there that Brian was worried about going back there. Maybe he was afraid they might see something, or something along those lines. You guys have any thoughts on that?
My understanding, now, I looked at this, and this isn't, the sources weren't related to the story. This is pre-existing information about the Jackson Hole, I don't call it controversy, but just the naming convention. My understanding is that they're both the same thing, but Jackson Hole refers more to an area, or maybe I have that backwards, but one's an area and one's a more definitive, like a town.
Yeah.
And on top of that, people who live there refer to them interchangeable.
Right.
Jackson or Jackson Hole. It's the same. They mean the same thing. So it's strange that he would overreact. He could have clarified, right? He could have said, well, I'm not from around here. What does that mean?
Sure.
Well, he could have just made an assumption. Like, okay, I'm going to go to Jackson. They're going to Jackson Hole. That's a different place. I got to get out. They could be going in the wrong direction. I don't know where I'm going.
Maybe.
Because apparently Jackson is just one town, while Jackson Hole refers to the entire valley.
So Jackson Hole is the area.
Yeah,
it's a larger area, right?
Jackson Hole is the larger area. But yeah, you're right. They kind of use them interchangeably in that area. But he could have easily, mistaken, where we're going. It's like in Delaware, we have Newcastle County and the city of Newcastle. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to get, we're going to Newcastle. We're going to the city of Newcastle. Oh, crap. Can't go there.
I thought we were going to the county of Newcastle. Right? Yeah.
But not knowing, like, Newcastle, the city of Newcastle is in the county, and probably get just about anywhere from there, because Delaware is a really small state. or still larger than Rhode Island.
That's actually the only state that we're.
Yeah. Take that, Rhode Island.
Take that, Rhode Island.
So maybe he just got worried because he was unsure. But maybe we'll find out more details that there was something else, maybe evidence there or something. Who knows? Why he got freaked out at that.
He also apparently, with the second hitchhiker, when they got there, they offered to drive him up the drive, but he was trying to. He's like, "No, get me out of the gate,"
Yeah.
and like was trying to step out of a moving vehicle.
Yeah.
Because they were still moving, and he's like, "No, I'll get out right here," and was trying to like in a almost a rush to get out of the car.
Mm-hmm. So strange behavior for sure.
So some strange behavior. I'm not sure, how we can explain it, but I keep coming to Brian's defense only because innocent until proven guilty, right? And we have only some evidence of some strange behaviors, which could be the result of magic mushrooms or, him having, large quantities of cannabis on him at any given moment. Like, we don't know what caused those behaviors. It's absolutely possible that it's because he killed Gabby already and was kind of on edge because of that. Yeah. But it's also possible that he was on substances or that he's got an undiagnosed mental health issue that he was unmedicated for, or even one, frankly, we don't know. He might have a diagnosed mental health issue.
Yeah, we don't know much about his
that he was medicated for and just didn't have his medications, which is why this became a van ride from hell. We just don't know at this point. And
it seems unusual that based on the idea that they were going together, that they would be camping for days separately. Like that's the part I struggle is the multiple days without supplies.
Yeah.
And without, again, smelling like he should have smelled, which would have been bad. Right.
I mean, to be fair, I can see them coming to the conclusion that, hey, we need a few days apart.
That could be.
And him taking a small amount of supplies. Because as we've recently found out, another update, one of his best friends said he could survive in the wilderness for days or weeks with very few supplies.
That friend, by the way, seems to be convinced that he is alive. Right? That he's out there hiding from the police.
Yeah. He said, don't be fooled. Brian could survive indefinitely with very few supplies. Which might be why. He's like, I'm just going to take these things and I'm going to go out there. Maybe what he brought along with him was deodorant and soap.
Other fugitives have tried. It's actually pretty hard to live in the wilderness in the United States. The little bit of wilderness that's available, the rural areas, it's actually pretty difficult.
Yeah.
One guy is in the Supermax in Colorado with like Ted Kaczynski and other famous criminals. The Florence, Colorado Supermax, I think. He was the what was his name? Is it Eric Randolph? Is that what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He had
Eric Rudolph.
Eric Rudolph. Yeah.
People have been comparing this case, I think, to that as well.
Yeah, Eric Rudolph. He had some strange beliefs. Obviously, we won't get into, but he was very good at surviving in the wilderness. Like he was effective. He was experienced at it. Maybe Brian is too, but Eric Rudolph really he committed to being out there for a long time. And he got caught by a uniformed cop at night, like when he was raiding a trash can. I mean, it was. He knew he was taking a risk. Like he was going someplace, he would raid the trash cans for food, which kind of a sad commentary on, what we do with food. But he was raiding them, and he knew that he was making a tactical mistake. But he ventured out, and
got nailed.
It was like a 23-year-old police officer who was brand new or something caught him. And this is a guy who's extremely experienced, and now is life in prison in the Supermax.
Right. Now Brian, it's entirely possible that they realized that they were on this van ride to hell. Things were getting too toxic. He decided to go off on his own. I kind of doubt that's the case, but again, we just don't have the evidence.
We don't know.
It's right now as equally plausible, and maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll find out that there's DNA that doesn't match Brian's underneath Gabby's fingernails. And that'll lead us to somebody else because there are all sorts of dangers out there and other people who could be very dangerous. And maybe we'll find that there's Brian's DNA under her fingernails and we'll find a clearer picture. At this point, we just don't know. So I kind of keep taking the devil's advocate side, even though to point out that we don't have the evidence. Yeah. And everything else is we're speculating.
There's many puzzle pieces still missing in this. Yeah, we have more than we did. But yeah, it doesn't really, you can't make out a face yet when you're looking at this puzzle.
It would be anybody that's trying to hide out somewhere. I mean, you got to eat at some point. And even if Brian brought food with him wherever he went, you can't bring that much. At some point, you need to kind of restock, resupply.
That's where Rudolph ran to his problem, right?
Exactly.
So he would raid places that were throwing away food, but he had to keep returning. He could only store it for so long. He didn't have refrigeration.
Right.
And that led to him getting caught.
And of course, if you're out in the wilderness or in the wild or something, you're out there with animals, even if it's insects, I mean, you've got food out there, animals, insects, and everything are going to be drawn to that. So you can't necessarily keep a lot around for that reason as well, and also refrigeration and storage and all that. So it would be difficult. And I think more and more people are suggesting that perhaps he had help or has help from somebody else. Now, I think maybe what tells me that that's a possibility is the behavior of Brian's parents. We haven't heard anything from them. They've been secluded in their house primarily, even though they have so many reporters around. They've left at times, but primarily they're staying there. They're not saying anything to anybody. We don't know any information from them about Brian. So it's very, of course, intentional that they are keeping their mouths shut. There's something else. I don't know if this was true or not, but there was reported that they went on a camping trip shortly after Brian went back.
The neighbors.
That's right.
I think his last name's Guthrie. The neighbors. I think I've seen them on TV a few times.
You're right.
We get interviewed.
And they said they saw him leave, and so it's possible that there was something in that trip that would help Brian leave, or maybe he left after that trip, or I'm not really sure, but their behavior is strange and would lead me to believe that maybe there's a lot more to it than we don't know because they're not saying anything. And perhaps there are other people out there that are helping Brian, or maybe he's out there and he's not alive any longer or something. But there's a lot of room for speculation, and thinking that Brian could just be surviving out there. That's tough because he's young, and I don't know if he has a lot of life skills or not. I didn't see any indication of that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I guess anything's possible.
It's also possible that for his parents that they've already told the police everything that they know.
Sure.
Because maybe Brian didn't talk about it.
Perhaps.
So, hey, where's Gabby? I don't know.
Well, they can't be compelled to talk, so they could just choose not to talk. Right?
Yeah.
They have the same rights where they can just not offer any helpful information.
Yeah. And it does seem odd, but again, they have an attorney. And the attorney's saying don't talk. If they've told the police everything that they know, there's no reason for them to talk to the media.
Yeah. I wonder how long the media is going to camp out outside their house.
It's going to be a while.
It can't just happen indefinitely.
It's going to be a little while until some other case comes up that takes the media attention, or Brian Laundrie is caught.
Yeah, that would do it. That would be in their best interest, really.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise the media can't just stay out there forever in hopes that something happens or they come outside or whatever. So it's, I don't know. I hope he's found soon.
A couple months though.
They could hang out. Yeah.
I mean, they were hanging out in front of Scott Peterson's house for several months. Mm-hmm. They can camp out for almost as long as Brian can in the wilderness. Apparently,
who can hold out the longest? Would be the game there.
Yeah. So I think that brings us up to date, right? This case,
as far as I know,
pretty much.
I'm not aware of any new.
I think the only other thing that I can think of is that Brian's parents did tell police that he left without his wallet or cell phone.
Oh, that's right.
I think when he left on Tuesday, he took his backpack, said he was going to the reserve, but left his phone and wallet behind. So who knows what that means?
Yeah, that could push this whole idea that he's out there surviving.
It could also push the idea that he went out there to kill himself.
Right. It's probably one of the two.
Yeah. I suspect that they're not going to find him alive. I suspect that if they find him, it'll be dead. He'll be dead.
Yeah. I would lean toward that as more probable than alive as well. Yeah. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, you guys are probably right. Yeah, I think he's hiding out somewhere. I think he's got access to something. So I'll just go with, it's probably more likely what you guys said, but I'll just go with a different theory here, that he's hiding out somewhere and he has access to something that's keeping him alive, food and whatever else, shelter. Maybe he's being helped by somebody, maybe he's not. I don't know, a friend, family member, something like that. But yeah, that's what I'll go with.
One of our commenters said werewolf.
You go. There you go.
Maybe he's a werewolf out there, or a were-panther.
That's right. It could be. So before we get to the comments, because in this episode we'll be looking at some comments, as we indicated before, was a few things I want to note. One is we don't always release these sequentially. Right. That's important. And the second one is I want to quickly cover the missing white woman syndrome, right, as a topic. I've talked about it in another video on my other channel. And, this has been, it's one of those things that I think Joy Reid actually brought this up this time. It was Gwen Eiffel who came up with the term years ago in reference to this case, right? So Joy Reid basically saying this could be why the Gabby Petito case is getting so much attention. Right. As usual, we look to science for the answer, and this time, science, there's not a lot of research, right? I read the available articles on this, and the conclusion I came to from reading them all is that the construct exists, but not at the level that we usually apply, like statistical significance. Like, it probably exists. It's more of a preponderance of evidence than we can say it definitively does mathematically. We don't know that. But part of that could be we just don't have the data or the analysis. We don't have the data to analyze. And I think it's very confusing the way these different sources report race. Not so much gender. They tend to report that pretty clearly, but race is confusing in the data. So we might not even have the data categorized correctly to even figure this out. At a more kind of common sense level, it seems clear this is a real construct. Yeah. We've seen it many times. Yeah.
I think part of where that construct comes from is just the demographic makeup of the country and what they call the rules of attraction, right? The demographic makeup of the country is primarily white. 77%, I think, during the last census was 77% white. And that kind of, with the laws of attraction, we are attracted to people based on similarities. So at first glance, when we're looking at physical features of things, that's what draws us to news things and things, the vast majority of people in the country are drawn to this white people. And that's not to say, and that's one of the reasons why in entertainment, it's so important to have more representation for minorities. Why it's so important to get it up there, because we need to have more demonstration of minorities in positive roles, in positive situations, because when we don't have that, the vast majority of people only get a negative skew of things. It is important for our media to do that, but the media turnover is so rapid with social media and with, the mass media, mainstream media. It's such a rapid turnover of news cycles that, it's the major news cycles look at what's trending on the internet. And what's trending on the internet is what we're going to look at. And then we run stories on it. And as soon as one outlet grabs a hold, every other outlet's got to do the same thing.
Right. They have to compete.
Right. This has been going on for a very, very long time. In fact, one of my favorite instances of this happened in an episode of Family Guy. I love Family Guy. It's almost as good as The Simpsons. Not quite. But almost. It has some pretty funny things. There's an episode that came out actually in 2006. 2006. It was in the 5th season of Family Guy. The cutaway is set up as like, Peter says, it's like all of America gets distracted and whenever a cute white girl dies, right? And it flashes over to a police officer giving an interview in front of reporters, and he goes, "We regret to report that not all children on board the school bus survived. We've identified the body of one victim, 9-year-old Becky Gunderson." And all of the reporters like, "Oh, no, that's terrible." Oh. And he goes, "Wait, nope, it's Becky Gutierrez." And all the reporters are, "Oh, man." And somebody in the background just goes, "Oh, that's not news." Right? And it's such, in 2006, like that.
Yeah, that's how prevalent.
That's how prevalent it is. And that joke is really huge social commentary.
It is.
That is in pointing out that, hey, this thing happens so much that we have to blow it out of proportion and exaggeration to get attention to that.
Yeah. Well, sadly, I think it rings true.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even though people wouldn't be that obvious, that's what they're doing, right?
It's kind of, the joke is kind of based on they said the quiet part out loud.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. 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 I think that I think the missing white woman syndrome is something that truly happens, but I think it's complex because it's an intersection of race and gender, and one could argue social status and other constructs, attraction, things like that. So it's not as simple to say, well, it's just based on race. You know, we see kind of the gender component too. We're missing, again, this is not all crime, although it's probably relevant to most crime. We're talking missing persons cases. When men go missing, nobody cares. Media doesn't worry about that, even though that happens pretty frequently. Men, boys go missing. So you have kind of this combination where if you look at a missing person, if they're white, if they're female, if they're younger, if they're upper middle class, if they're attractive, that's like the formula. Like if all those boxes are checked, send out the news van.
Yeah.
If not, to some extent, they might get looked at.
Well, that goes. I was able to see two studies, 2010 and 2015, talked about the percentage of different percentages. So, for example, 14%, according to these studies, 14% of children in the U.S. are black, but account for about 35% of the missing children on the FBI database. So disproportionate there, right? So versus that you were talking about this, Dr. Grande, they put, for whatever reason, put white and Hispanic children in the same category for this. So white and Hispanic children make up 76% of the U.S. population, but account for 57% of the missing children. So, but the worst part about it is that references to these, to black children, black missing children, only make up, depending on the study you look at, between 7 and 20% of the media coverage. And so it's like, okay, so they make up a larger proportion of the missing children, but they get far less media coverage. And so, yeah, that's the responsibility of news networks. It's the responsibility of content creators, right? Responsibility of everyone, really, just people in general, to recognize their own biases and to recognize that we are probably going to react more or in a certain way to people that look more like us, right? That's something we talk about when we train to become counselors, and something that we need to look at our whole lives as well. Recognizing, am I doing something specific here? Am I singling people out or not paying attention to certain groups? It's easy for all of us to do. I think we can all say we're guilty of that at some point. We may not realize it, certainly, but we're guilty of it at some point. And so it requires some discipline there to realize and to be very aware of how we're reacting, what we're doing, what we're talking about, who we're talking about, things like that. And so I think, yeah, there's certainly a lot of factors that play into the missing white woman syndrome. And you could probably look at people who are famous as well. You could say that there's probably a larger percentage of white people, probably white women in particular, that are famous versus white men versus those in a minority category. And so maybe that plays into it as well. And much to your point, Mike, we have to realize how much time or energy or prevalence we're giving people in different categories or different races or genders, and understanding how that is viewed, or how the impression that we're giving, or making these people look like they're bad or good, or how might that come off to the viewing public as well. There's a lot of factors to it.
Yeah, it's a highly complex problem. Specifically looking at the case of Gabby Petito, like I talked about this in the other video, I don't actually see this case as an example of the missing white woman white woman syndrome, right? Like, again, I think the syndrome, based on the evidence, I think it does exist. I don't think this is a good example. I think this case is fascinating and would attract people no matter what. Like, it just has so many components, especially with the missing, potential murder. We don't know, but, the missing person, the missing boyfriend, fiance, that really ramps things up. Cases depend on a steady supply of news, not too much, right? But some, because everything comes out, people lose interest. But if a little bit comes out, it actually builds interest, and that's what's happened here.
And I think that part of it with this particular case is it's the fact that it's a national case, no matter what you say, because it's a Long Island woman living in Florida who went across the country and went missing in Wyoming. Like, what? Like, you immediately have multiple states involved, and so multiple people like, wait, what's going on? You got across state lines, all of this stuff. I mean, it does. Cases like this, they do also bring some attention to other minority cases, like the fact that the mainstream media now is recognizing that in between 2011 and 2020, 759 Native American women went missing in the same area of Wyoming where Gabby Petito went missing.
It's incredible. Right?
Incredible that we now that mainstream media has finally picked up on that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe some more resources need to go into those particular cases. And it is important for us to check our biases. And that's one of the things as counselors that we all learn. Like we have to be aware of our biases and try to check them at every opportunity that we can. Like I was looking at the cases that we've covered. And when it comes to our murder part, solely murder part, we have one person of color represented in the murder part.
That's right, Ronnie O'Neill.
Ronnie O'Neill. And we have 14 episodes of that up. That means that 5% of our coverage features people of color, right? Which, if we're going to get to any kind of demographic statistical similarity to the general public, we need to do a few more cases with people of color.
Absolutely.
And we need to look into that. Now, I think we're a little bit better off with Alien Lizard Humanoids because we did have Bhagwan Rajneesh and we had Barney Hill. Mm-hmm. So we're and we have fewer episodes of it as well. So we're a little bit better off percentage-wise there. But we have to check our own biases and start working on that ourselves. But with the other area that this does come up is that it did bring some attention to things, and certain things, there was movement on certain things. There was a case, I was talking about this just before we started filming, a case of a Native American woman who went missing in Las Vegas on a trip to Las Vegas. She went missing on September 3rd. Her name was Riatha May Finkbonner. And she went missing on September 3rd in Las Vegas. And there was, when there was a lot of voice being brought up about so many missing Native American women, this case kind of came up on several places. And they were like, okay, she's missing. She's been missing since September 3rd. So this case, I saw this was reported on the 23rd of September. Okay. And then just yesterday, she was found alive and well in Las Vegas.
Where she went missing from.
She was there on a trip with her fiance and friends. She just went missing. Family's been looking for her. She was found alive and well. But I think that she was only found alive and well because more people had become aware of her missing and started looking. Tips came in, she was found. So despite where the mainstream media and even content creators on YouTube get stuck into white woman syndrome, it still can bring attention to minority cases in a meaningful way. But we also have to recognize that it's bringing that attention and then work to do better in the future.
Yeah, I think that... I think when you look at the missing white woman syndrome, what you find is that a lot of people are missing, right? It's not just the race and the gender. What's stunning to me is how many people are actually missing. Mm-hmm. It just brings awareness to missing people. Yeah. And then, of course, you look at the details and say, well, certainly more whites are selected, more women are selected. So we have problems there too. But it's just stunning at any given time how many people are actually missing of all races and genders and social status. It's pretty scary to think how many people can just vanish.
Yeah.
In an industrialized society.
In a place where cameras are everywhere, how do you just up and vanish?
Yeah.
And I'll ask Brian Laundrie.
Yeah.
If you can find him. Mm-hmm. If he'll come out of hiding to face the beard.
That's right. Maybe this will break the case.
It might.
So that's our update for Gabby Petito. And as we indicated, we're going to look at a few comments to wrap up this video and try to do our best to answer the questions that are asked. Jeff, you have those, right?
Jeff has those questions.
Yeah. All right, so first one reads, can you talk a bit about how illness, particularly chronic ones, affect mental health?
Yeah. So like chronic physical illness?
That was the
I
assumption.
presume? Yeah. I'll tell you, I think that it has a tremendous impact. One of the things I've seen is chronic pain, in particular with opioids, and what a situation that causes. But it doesn't have to be anything with an addiction. It can be depression, anxiety, all kinds of stress from having dysfunction of some type, right? Just not being able to work as efficiently, work as much, the pain, the concerns about mortality, the existential crisis that brings up. So yeah, the physical weaves in very strongly. It's really, you can't separate it. Yeah. But using the example of chronic pain, it's one of the more gruesome ones we see often as counselors, where you have somebody's in an accident, maybe sports injury, something like that, and they start taking like Percocet, Vicodin, and they never really cared for it before. It took away the pain, but then when the pain started to subside, they continued their usage, and before you know it, and it really is shockingly fast, they're buying heroin.
Yeah. Well, heroin's cheaper.
Yeah, and more effective, and more dangerous too, but more effective for the high. But yeah, I think that it's a very slippery slope with that.
It certainly adds to the mental health and makes it worse in many cases. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was just saying that stress is that big thing. It's the exacerbator. Mm-hmm. Stress makes everything worse. Mm-hmm. And chronic illnesses, physical illnesses, bring on more stress. And if we talk about Gestalt therapy, the Gestalt view is there is no separation between mind and body. Like that's an artificial construct of earlier ages. Like our brain is an organ as part of the body. It is part of the body. So our bodies and minds react to what's going on with it, and also, react to each other. So physical stress from injury or chronic illness brings up stress levels on the brain, and then, it then the mental illnesses cause more stress on the body, which becomes a cycle and can absolutely make things a lot worse.
It's like a whole new set of things to work through. Whatever progress you were making before, if pain or some kind of chronic illness came on at some point during therapy, it's like, well, whatever we worked on before, now this is like a whole different set of things, because now you've got so many different factors, so many other factors that are contributing and playing into this as well. It's you're right. It can't separate them. Second question. In cases like Chris Watts, and potentially this case, we're talking about Gabby Petito, in this one, can psychopathy arise or be felt for an individual later in his or her life? So can it arise or be felt? Like, are there indicators of psychopathy occurring in somebody's life?
Yeah, I would say that in almost every case, psychopathy starts young, right? There's no such thing as late onset personality disorders. And psychopathy has a parallel over to antisocial, narcissistic, and to the lesser extent, borderline personality disorders. The big ones would be antisocial and narcissistic, of course. That's something, that kind of manipulative nature, callousness, the charm, the lack of remorse, lack of empathy, lack of guilt, that's going to start early in almost every case. You're hardwired that way. Not all psychopaths, of course, go on to commit crimes.
Right.
Like we know that subclinically, a lot of police officers have psychopathy. They need it to function. Surgeons have subclinical psychopathy. Psychopathy is actually good for certain professions.
They need to not be able to wrap themselves up in what they're doing, but rather disconnect from it and not feel that.
You don't want a passionate surgeon. That's bad. If they're screaming at the sight of blood, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. You don't want that. You want somebody who's like, I've seen this before. You're a biological machine. I can fix you. Now I'm going to fix you.
And I have to physically cut into you, perhaps as well. And yeah.
And actually, to some extent, they have to kind of enjoy the mechanics of that, right? They have to enjoy what they do in order to be good at it. Doesn't mean they want to cause pain, but it means they enjoy the puzzle of trying to cut through somebody and attach different things, or whatever they do. I don't know. I'm not a surgeon, but I know it's complex, and I know you have to disregard like blood and gore completely. Like they don't even really see that the same way that other people would. But yeah, unfortunately, when too much psychopathy, people end up dangerous.
To be fair, I always say this. To be fair, there are going to be instances of people who that psychopathy is not caught at a young age, or it's not recognized even by themselves or by anyone around them until they hit an older age. So it could appear to be just a sudden snap. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, they were fine until, they were a wonderful person right up until, and that's where we might see something like that in this case, right? Where, Brian's behaviors might be odd, maybe a little toxic, but it wasn't until he snapped.
Yeah, being isolated. Being isolated will keep you shielded from scrutiny.
Yeah.
Right? With one person, you're driving around. Yeah, you could go many, many years and nobody would be like, oh, that person's a psychopath.
Yeah. And very often psychopaths can operate within society perfectly well.
Yeah, well, especially once...
Gary Ridgway.
Yeah, especially when they learn how people view them.
Yeah.
Even if they don't understand it like a true insight level, they appreciate that it's true, that they're viewed as different. And they adjust. Like, Gary Ridgway, very good, like worked 30 years in the same job or whatever. I mean, he really blended in.
Yeah. And also other things that could complicate that, like substance abuse and kind of, at the very least, encouraging the psychopathy or bringing that out more in somebody, or causing a bit of a snap in somebody based on what they're using or something along those lines. We see psychopathy could play a role in other things where it's a different kind of behavior for that person, or very different from what people are used to seeing with that person. And you could really bring out a different side of that person than what they're used to seeing. Third question, this one's for Mike. So it's at GameMaster_Mike. So they've created a name for you. Would you kindly share further information about your new venture, gaming therapy?
Okay. So the premise is using role-playing games to build a narrative through which clients can work on addressing clinical issues that they might have. Role-playing has been part of treatment of mental health disorders for decades at least. It's kind of a go-to. It's like, okay, I'm going to be you. You be me. What would you tell me if I said this to you? Mm-hmm. Right? It's very similar premise. It's kind of put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and people are able to often open up way more when they're not themselves, when they're stepped outside of themselves, to be able to touch on some things that are very personal. Right? If I can put if I can put a barrier between how I feel and what's really going on, I can more freely talk about it. And that's kind of part of the premise of using a role-playing game for that purpose. I also want to use a lot of the narrative therapy that I practice to externalize things. One of the things that I'm going to do as part of the game is, like, I'll have like an hour of build up and debrief, like half hour before and after we play for 2 hours, where we build into the game, and then debrief afterwards. We'll talk about some of the things that happened in the last game, and then we'll talk about what happened in this game from a clinical standpoint, like what's going on. I also have safety tools in place, so if somebody's starting to get really emotional about what's going on in the game, they can, anonymously let me know, and we can move off of that topic completely, or kind of wrap up that scene. But I also want to utilize the narrative therapy to have them externalize like the anxiety that they might be feeling, because I'm going to focus on anxiety for this group, and like describe it as a D&D monster, right? And then I'll use that later, like throughout the game. I'll put tailor specifically their monsters into the game so that their characters kind of have to face down that anxiety, that fear monster, and try and bring them head on, and utilize. The most important thing is to utilize actual interventions, right? Like teaching mindfulness meditation. Like we're going to work on one of the game sessions is going to have the characters learning some mindfulness techniques, and we'll play through that as I teach it to them. So it's going to be a way of modeling, a way of separating, a way of including narrative stuff, and just overall a way of engaging and building a lot of rapport and fun into the therapeutic process, because therapy doesn't have to be deadly serious. It's a very deadly serious thing, mental health, but the process of healing from it doesn't have to be.
It can actually be fun.
Yeah. The idea is, I think laughter is one of the best medicines, and laughter can be a huge barometer for depression symptoms. Like if you're feeling depression and you suddenly find yourself laughing at a comedy album, like that might be really a great way. And anxiety, if you can laugh while you're feeling anxiety, the anxiety will start to come down quite a bit. So, but that's a little bit about the game therapy, D&D therapy. I'm getting started with that. This is Friday. Tuesday is our first game. It's our session 0. So
Nice.
I'm putting that together. I've got a few clients, and it's going to be. I'm hoping it's going to be fun.
People have asked as well, how do they get involved in something like that? And specifically with yours. So I imagine that this is something only for people that are in Delaware, based on licensure and all that.
In or can travel into.
Right. Okay.
Because the site that I'm doing therapy at is in Delaware. I'm licensed in Delaware. So, if people are, from the nearby areas in Pennsylvania or Maryland or Jersey, and they want to travel into, I can definitely have them join. It would be wonderful to become involved in becoming a therapeutic game master. There's a couple of organizations. The one I went through is called Geek Therapeutics. They run a 12 CE training course across 13 weeks, or 12 weeks. It's 12 weeks. And I don't remember how many weeks it was. It could have been 9. But it's 12 CEs, and which was phenomenal. It was actually a relatively decent price for 12 CEs. And it went through a lot of how to run a game, how to play the game. There were weekly sessions in different games to get some good exposure, because I've been playing the games for 20 years, so I didn't really need that part of it, but it was fun to engage with it. And a very, very good training regimen where they talked about things like ethics and how gaming is impacted by the ethical codes of the APA, the National Social Workers groups, the ACA, and things about how to utilize and implement therapeutic interventions in the games, which was great. And then a lot about how to do notes.
Right.
We still have to do notes and things like that. But some of the people who were in the training weren't even clinicians. Like they were taking the training so that they could help clinicians. Like a clinician could sit in and be the clinician doing the therapeutic side while they were doing the dungeon mastering side, the game mastering side. So, there is a possibility for that. The website's actually really easy. It's therapeuticgamemaster.com. For anybody who might be interested in looking into that program to join and become part of it.
Guess there wasn't a lot of demand for that.
No, there really wasn't. There really wasn't. But there's another couple of organizations out there. You can Google search pretty easily. There's one out of Oregon that's doing I think it's called RPG research. They're performing actual research. Geek Therapeutics is also collecting data, because there isn't a lot of literature out there on this specific type of intervention. A lot of the scientific literature is drawn from different areas, like the role-playing as one area, these types of interventions another area, and drawn together to give some scientific backing to this. I think there's a lot of efficacy in it, and I can't wait to see how it really helps the clients from a personal standpoint. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from counselors who have done this.
Well, that's the start, right?
Yeah, that's the start. But they're trying to collect a lot more actual evidence, so they can write articles into peer-reviewed articles.
Excellent. Yeah. So clearly, you've been doing game therapy your whole life.
Pretty much.
So, I mean, whether you were receiving with it, like this was therapeutic for you, or whatever. So clearly, this is a way to make it more official, make it something that like is more viable on a larger scale and things like that, and more recognized.
Something that I can get paid for.
Well, that's important too. People have seemed to be asking, how do I get my son or daughter or a friend, or how do I get involved in this? I imagine maybe there's not a list of who's having these games yet or something like that. Is there anything out there like that?
Not that I'm aware of at this point. Yeah. I mean, I do know that Geek Therapeutics is starting on their Twitter feed. They're putting out spotlighted people who have finished and completed the program, who are allowing it, and in different areas. And I know the people are from all over the country. But so far they've had, I think, 13 cohorts come through. I think the 13th is actually running right now. I was a part of the 10th cohort, and there's only 6 people per cohort. So 60 people total in the country right now are certified through Geek Therapeutics. So it's still new, still burgeoning, still kind of up and coming. But there's millions and millions of people who are playing D&D these days, especially after 2020. COVID, putting people together, separating people out. So they have nothing but time on their hands. Virtual tabletop programs like Roll20 or the Foundry became huge websites where people could play these games virtually with separation, and just millions and millions of people playing. And I think it's going to be a great therapeutic tool.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's some kind of a list or database of when are these games happening, who's leading these games, where are they happening, et cetera, that could come out at some point and be real comprehensive. Because you look in the comments for our videos, and a lot of people mention it, saying like, I would love this, I wish this had been around for years before, and I've been playing D&D for so many years, and this would be so cool, so certainly there's demand for it, no doubt about it.
I'm hoping to get a website and possibly a Facebook and Twitter feed up for the group that I'm doing. It's called Therapy and Tabletops.
Nice.
TNT.
TNT. It's clever.
It's Therapy and Tabletops Adventures in Mental Health.
Nice.
Is what I'm calling it. So I'm hoping to get a website, maybe a Twitter feed, and a Facebook page up for that within the next couple of months. Kind of piloting this one group right now just to see how it goes and how I'm able to get through it. And then I hope to just kind of push advertising up so I can get a little bit more.
Nice. Very good.
Interestingly, one of the clinicians, she's a doctoral candidate in psychology who works at the offices that I work at. She's like, "You're the one doing the D&D therapy, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "My entire class has been talking about this." Because she mentioned it at one point after I put the first set of flyers out. She's like, "My entire class has been talking about this." I'm like, "Well, that's great. I'm super happy that people have been interested in it." And I was even telling her like there might be some point where I want to have a second clinician in the room.
That sounds like you're going to need it,
right? Because if I'm doing 6 people for the group and I'm trying to run the game, it'd be helpful to have another clinician there keeping an eye on the other people and their reactions, so that if somebody's having a reaction in a given scene, we can kind of like pivot into the therapeutic side of things.
Yeah, that's cool. Excellent. So we got 2 more questions. Next one, top 5 favorite bands for each of you. I'll go first on this one. So my number 1 favorite band, a band called New World Sun out of Canada. I saw them live once, probably, 12 years ago or so, and longer than that. And I was instantly hooked. They put on an incredible show, incredible musicians. Second, this is in no order, but Rush, also out of Canada. Incredible musicians, musicianship, and the amount of the quality of songs that they put out, incredible. Rest in peace, Neil Peart, of course, their drummer. Number 3, Delta Ray, band out of Tennessee, I think. Similarly, saw them live and was hooked. They put on an incredible show. They're great musicians, really passionate about what they do, and it's very clear in their music and in their performances. A band called Living Sacrifice out of Little Rock, Arkansas, is a metal band that my sister told me about them when I was a teenager. And I don't listen to them as much now, but they're one of those bands that I could just, anytime I hear them, I could just, I never grow tired of them, and I could always listen to them at a moment's notice. And then the fifth spot, I was torn. These again are bands that I like. I appreciate their music. They've done a lot for me in terms of musical influence. But Metallica and Led Zeppelin, which are not in the same category, but again, they're ones that I could listen to at any time. I never grow tired of their songs. Led Zeppelin had a huge influence on my own musicianship as a drummer, and how I played. And John Bonham, of course, their drummer, also rest in peace. It was a fantastic drummer. Metallica, I think they have brought what they've done for to popularize or bring into mainstream like thrash metal music and stuff like that, I think cannot be understated, and they've been around forever. They played in Newark some years ago on Main Street at the Stone Balloon at the time. And I think their contribution to music can't be understated. And I think their quality music is really good too. So those are my top 5, but I added in the 6th one as well.
Go, Mike.
All right. Well, mine, no particular order for these. I have a very eclectic taste in music. Like my Pandora playlist is 400 songs long, and I think there's only like 3 songs from any given band or artist. Like I listen to what I like, but I find Queen, my absolute favorites. There's so many great Queen songs out there, just great. And again, it's kind of a geeky connection. I love Highlander, and like the entire soundtrack is done by Queen.
Right, yeah.
They loved doing the music for that, but and they got to see the dailies as the film was being shot, and they kind of, some of them they wrote some of the songs based on what was going on in the movie. Like one of my favorites from that soundtrack is "It's a Kind of Magic," which is actually based on hearing one line spoken by Christopher Lambert in one scene, and it was like, love it, and wrote an entire song on it. It's great. Queen's wonderful band. Kenny Wayne Shepherd. I love Kenny Wayne Shepherd. He's a great guitarist. I love a good guitar. Dragon Force. I love Dragon Force.
Okay.
It's some good power metal right there. Some great guitar. Herman Lee's one of the most fantastic guitarists.
Certainly, they get made fun of for being almost too fast or almost too like just trying to prove that they could be that fast. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Dragon Force is great. I love a lot of their songs, especially some, Dragon Force. Not surprised that that's on the list. Creedence, Clearwater Revival. I love some Creedence. So many classic songs by Creedence. And Eminem. Actually, like I got turned on to Eminem when I was working inpatient, because like I used to do music therapy with my clients on Saturdays. Like Fridays, I would give them the sign-up sheet. It's like pick a couple of songs, put them on the list. On Saturday, because it's easy day, we'd just in group play the music, talk about what this song means to you, why you picked it, what does it have to do with your recovery or your addiction. And one of the artists that was picked more often than any other was Eminem. So I got to hear a wide variety of his songs. I started like just appreciating that he puts so much of himself into everything that he does. Like some of his earlier stuff I've listened to, kind of a caricature of things, but then he started going just like real. Like going into like his real story, true things, and just laying it down. And that's really what drew me into him. I just appreciate that realness.
Yeah. Dr. Grande?
Yeah, so kind of like Mike was describing, I just listen to songs, very song driven. I really don't care who sings it, and sometimes I don't even know. like I could tell you the name, but I don't I haven't seen them, and like I haven't seen them on TV. I don't know what they look like, what else they worked on. If I hear another song, I might be like, that sounds like the same style, and then I realize it's the same person.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of all over the place, but just a few. I like Little River Band, like Cool Change, the song Cool Change. Bee Gees, Staying Alive, Saturday Night Fever. I think Chicago. I don't know if they have any great songs. I have one that I have is a great Will You Still Love Me, but they have a lot of good songs, Like they're a very consistent band. Air Supply. Can't go wrong with Air Supply. And I've seen them in concert. What was that, 4?
Yeah.
I have to pick one more. I don't know. Journey. I would say Journey.
Oh, Journey.
Yeah.
Classic Journey.
Yeah. Now, Journey, I think, has a lot of great songs.
Yeah.
Like they're very consistent, very high quality. So,
yeah,
that's what I go with.
Very nice. All right, so last question. What is your guys' favorite means of consuming true crime content? So podcasts, YouTube, online articles, etc. So I'll say for myself, my favorite, it doesn't really matter what the medium is, but if I can listen to something, I really like to just be able to have my earphones in and listen to something while I'm working on the house. So I was putting a new floor in our house this week, and anything I could listen to while I'm doing that, I find to be helpful. I'm able to accomplish something, but also kind of get the details of it at the same time. Now, of course, reading things can't be understated as well. Being able to just sit down and read through information. And with that, of course, you're drawing your own conclusions as you're reading. So like you have to use your imagination a bit more. Somebody's not telling you the details, you're finding them out for yourself, and you can kind of create that mental picture a little bit differently, perhaps a little bit easier. So, so I would say podcasts for sure, YouTube, of course, online articles. So I don't know if I could pick a favorite. It just depends on what I'm doing at the time. And of course, you got to find time sometimes to read things or really do some research, look up different articles. So I don't think I have a favorite. Just depends on what I'm doing, I guess.
Very good.
So I think for me, TV shows, 2020, 48 Hours, those are always great go-tos because they're a great place to start. They give me a great overview of what's going on with the case. Very often you get people's own words on things, which is always wonderful. And then when it comes time to like prep for doing an episode, it's kind of watch the shows, watch as many of them as I can, especially, cases like Jodi Arias. There's so many documentaries made for Jodi Arias. I watched like almost all of them. Then, other shows, things we've done, there aren't as many. So it's kind of reaching to try and find them. But they're a good place to start. Get as many of the good words as I can. Get the good, things. And I do it while I'm playing video games. I mean, sitting on my couch, I have my tablet open with a Bluetooth speaker playing off of either Netflix or Hulu or something else. And, listening to that while I'm just mindlessly playing a video game. So I'm catching a lot of the details. And then I go to articles online, to find out more details about, well, that was an interesting thing that they said. Let me find out more about that. Yeah. And that's when I add that into what we're discussing, is finding those little details. So TV followed by, articles online.
Very good. Yeah, I think for me, it's really dependent on what I'm doing, right? So producing a lot of videos, there's often a real pressure to find accurate compressed data. And for that, court documents, appeals actually work pretty well. If an offender appealed, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get a hold of that appeal. And lawyers have a lot of experience writing. They have a lot of experience being precise. And when they are addressing an appeal, either filing or answering, they have a summary of the case. Often it's the prosecutors, right? I'll read like the prosecutors will put the case together, and it's great. Like it's it's probably accurate. Again, it's very compressed. They don't add any bubbly language. It's just, here's what happened. Here's what we know. And just, I love the precision. It's very dry though. right? You're not going to get, like Mike was saying, the interviews, people's reactions. You're missing a whole lot, but you're getting a great factual basis to build an outline that then you can go populate with other details. So then after court documents, I'll go to like news media, and you have to read the bad side or bad part of that is you have to read a lot of those. And then you get like one new piece of information that you can take over at each one. Like it's just, sometimes I've read like 50 of those to get, the items for one case. Most of the time it's probably more like a dozen. And if you're lucky, you'll get somebody who did like a timeline, which you can compare to the appeal document or whatever's court documents are available. Sometimes it's just like probable cause statement, things that you can't trust as much because that's early in the case. But then, so after that, like going through the media, I don't really depend too much on videos, but I will go with the kind of the mainstream, like 2020, 48 hours. I like 48 hours in particular because they make so much. But 2020 is like a longer episode, which goes more into detail. I think they just released a new 2020 on some case.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I watched it. I don't remember which one it is. If I saw the title, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I remember that because I watched it.
Yeah, and just last night I watched the one on Bianca Devins that just came out. So that's like kind of an interesting example of the process, right? So I had an outline on her already. That's a case I'm already working on. But I have many outlines that are kind of in suspended animation at any time for different reasons. Sometimes I'm waiting for a disposition on a case. Sometimes I just got distracted by somebody, like a case like Gabby Petito, where it became a priority. So I watched 48 hours, and I ran back to the outline. I'm like, well, this is a good time. It's fresh in my mind. I'm going to update that outline. I didn't add one thing new. The documents I had available had completely covered everything. There might have been one small thing that I got from 48 hours. So that's like a 44-minute investment for one item.
Which is significant. I mean, that takes you consider how many videos you put out per week, even per day. I'm sure you got to consider how much time you're taking on research in each individual thing.
Yeah, it has to be efficient. Yeah. But I enjoy 48 hours. I enjoy 2020. And of course, I watch just about every Netflix documentary or Hulu documentary or anything I can find on the cases. The Netflix ones, I watched one, wasn't a crime one, but the LuLaRoe, I just watched that one. And there's one on Billy Milligan that I'm going to be watching, a DID, ostensibly a DID case. But yeah, I've seen many Netflix ones. We covered one, I think, the Wild Wild Country, right? Yeah, which was excellent. Yeah,
such a great, so crazy.
Yeah, the long form documentaries are a struggle for time, but at least there you get a lot of information. Like they cover a lot. Like the LuLaRoe one, I watched that one first before looking at other sources, and they covered pretty much everything the other sources had. Like it was 4 hours, but I think it was 4 hours, something like that. But it was very good. It's a multi-level marketing company that sells leggings,
right?
And they got in some legal problems.
It's funny you mentioned that when you mentioned the looking at appeals forums. My first thought was Nora Jackson.
Mm-hmm. That was huge.
That's huge.
Yeah, that was longer than most.
Right. Yeah. That was like it was almost a transcript of the trial. Like that was a really long one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I read that one. I watched a few things on Nora Jackson and then read through that and yeah.
I think it was over 50 pages.
Yeah. I did want to mention one other show that I tend to watch as a go-to. This is just not even researching for cases like this, and it's a show on investigative discovery called On the Case with Paula Zahn. It's actually a wonderful show. It seems really balanced when it comes to the reporting of things, and they tend to focus on cases where they went unsolved for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. So some of the stuff that I really dig on, especially I've noticed there's a pattern of them covering cases that had resolution that also appeared on the 1980s Unsolved Mysteries show. Because I'll be watching an episode and be like, wow, this sounds really familiar. Where did I do Unsolved Mysteries? This was an Unsolved Mysteries. And then they cover the full resolution of the case and how they figured out who it really was much more clearly than they did in the Unsolved Mysteries episode because they just do a 30-second blurb. Update.
I imagine that at that point you hear Robert Stack's voice and like, oh, that's where I heard
Robert Stack.
Yeah. So the last item I use is books, right? Now we read a book for the Bluebell video that was relatively short. It was a mercy, but you know, I mean, it's good and bad. Like you want the detail, but you want to be able to finish. I've read other books that were much longer, and I've really had to build the skill of speed reading because I might have court documents, media articles, a Netflix documentary, and then there's a book, and I'm like, well, I don't want to not read it, but I kind of don't think books aren't known for being too reliable. They're not great sources written by one person, so like I don't want to miss something. So I'll go through and either read or speed read or a combination, and it's the worst return in terms of finding anything out. You'll get some neat details that you wouldn't get, like you could clever things. I think enhance the story, but you're going through a lot of nonsense. Like the police stopped at the donut shop. Boston cream was on the menu. Like what? Like why do I need to know? Like, I don't care.
Wait. Why do I need to know that the cop had a Boston cream donut? I mean, Boston cream is one of the kings of the donuts.
It's a great donut.
Naturally,
It's a great donut. But what does that have to do with the murder?
I mean, if you're reading a novel, that might be like you're just giving more detail, and you're able to create that picture in your mind. But for factual-based stuff, is it necessary?
I wish what they would do in books is partition factual, case-based information and like the filler, because some people want both. Like I was reading a book the other day, and it was in Nevada or something, and it was like a whole 2 pages on like Nevada has casinos. I know.
No kidding.
Yeah, wow.
I live in America. I'm aware of this.
They're giving like the average temperatures. Like okay,
It's hot.
It's a hot place, right? Yeah. So if you could have that in like one color or whatever, like bracketed, and then like, okay, she had a knife. She stabbed him 3 times. It was 6:42 p.m. when that happened. Like that's like separate it out for me or bold it.
Maybe we can write a book like that and try and get that to become the standard.
Give it a whole series, like write a book on each thing, and here's all the information, and here's the fluff. And that's our standard format. That's a good idea.
You have a fluff portion as the beginning, like you're just going to go creative writing, and then like at the end, it's like, this is the factual information that this chapter is based on.
That would be perfect. The other thing I don't like about books is the flowery descriptions. Like, so the book is usually the last thing I read. So I already know the case pretty well. And when they kind of describe, they run out of adjectives, right? So they're using synonyms that aren't really even synonyms anymore. Mm-hmm. And then you're looking at the transcript, the court documents, you're like, that's not what the person said. Like, that's not even close. Like, they changed the meaning by trying to, or they make assumptions. Right? They'll make assumptions about how something got a certain way. I'm like, no, that's not what happened. But they're just trying to make filler. Books are a lot of filler. Books are tough.
Yeah.
But again, you see that book title, and you don't want to record that video without having at least looked at it because you could miss something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that Nora Jackson. That was almost traumatic. Like, I had prepared pretty well for that case, and I was digging through, and I'm like, 50 pages? Like, what? Right. And it was all tight, good stuff. I'm like, I have to read this. I have to.
You can't skip anything in that. It's everything.
Yeah, that was almost like the transcript version or the written version of body cam footage. Like, that's how detailed that was.
Yeah, it was really good.
He walked into the room. He looked left. He looked right. Like,
it sure had a stain on it. Yeah,
but it was like, it was factual. Like, it was the actual police reports that were used to write that, and other investigative documents. Yeah. So if you ever want to learn about Nora Jackson, that's the way to go.
Yeah. And you can find that on Scribd or some of the other websites.
I've been told now that it's pronounced scribed.
Scribed.
Who knows? Either way, you can find it.
Scribbled.
I
always call it scribed, but yeah, I think it is supposed to be scribed. But
whatever.
Neither one really makes a lot of sense. I get the scribe connection, but why not just spell it right? It's so tough.
Gotta be catchy.
They have a lot of books, though. I subscribe to that, and books, court documents. Sometimes the court documents will come up just like a few days after the case. Like, like a probable cause statement, arrest warrant, whatever. Somebody will put it right up there. So it's almost like real time. So it's good.
You know, I found the other day too. I've never practiced DBT, therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and so I was curious about it. You know, and so I just happened to see this training. It was like multiple $100s. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not that interested in it. It's not something I plan to use. But I was like, well, I wonder what Scribd or what Scribd has. And there's like treatment manuals on there. And I'm like, oh, okay. There's like this 400-page book about a specific type of DBT therapy. And like, okay, well, all right, maybe that's the way to go then. I don't have to pay anything, well, just the subscription for this, but certainly not a $700 training that I wasn't going to do anyway. But now I can read about it at my own pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got some great stuff on there. I'm surprised how comprehensive it is.
Yeah.
Like, there's sometimes there's a title I can't get. I have to go somewhere else. But I can buy it. But just my subscription fee, that covers most every book I look for.
Yeah.
So it's a good deal. I think that one of my books is on there.
Huh.
I don't know how that all works with how they get books, whatever. But yeah. So I actually, I saw it there one day, and I'm like, that looks familiar. All right. So that's the comment section, right? So
yep.
Please,
that's all we got so far.
Yeah, so please put any questions you have. We'll answer them. Again, a reminder, we don't always go sequentially. So there's videos that are in the queue still where we don't do this, but we are doing it. They were older videos. I think we have one on Bluebell that's still in the pipeline, and Shayna Huber's, where we had a small technical malfunction that turned Mike red. He used his camera too. That's the camera that records Mike directly. And something was wrong with that camera. But we're going to release the video anyway.
It's almost like a red filter.
Yeah.
Or maybe Mike just was red. It's possible you were just red that night.
I could have been really red that night.
Yeah.
Could have been holding my breath the entire time.
Eating a lot of tomatoes maybe or something.
Yeah, so it's a technical malfunction that we have addressed. Camera 2 is operating within normal parameters at this time. All right. So any final thoughts about anything we've talked about?
I don't know if I can add anything. This is obviously... I do. Yes, I do have a final thought. We were talking about, or people have talked about how this case has created a lot of people are focused on this, right? A lot of media attention, a lot of attention on social media and everything. And it's also, we talked about people out there who are trying to solve this, trying to look at details online, trying to figure out things, trying to look into deeper into the details to figure out things that perhaps were missed or something like that. I came across a quote that I thought was pretty significant for this. Really described a lot of what we were talking about. It's from author Rachel Monroe, and she says, "This do-it-yourself sleuthing feels like work, which is exactly the point. In the face of tragedy, passivity feels awful. It's especially true if you see elements of your own trauma refracted in the headlines. It's much better to imagine yourself as helpful than one person whose midnight scrolling might crack the case." So we talked a lot about how people are really interested in this, and it makes sense, right? They want to feel like they're helpful. They want to feel like they're doing something to assist in this in some way, or perhaps they've went through something similar and they want to feel like they've helped. Maybe they even want to feel like they're making up for something they weren't able to do at some other point. Perhaps a sense of, maybe I can help to do something here, but maybe I wasn't able to before, So whatever it might be, hopefully this attention is ultimately helpful, right? It's been helpful. We already see it's been helpful in finding Gabby's body, right? Which is unfortunate that she was murdered, but nonetheless, finding her body and the attention, and other people may not have realized that it was Brian that they brought into their car when he was hitchhiking, if they hadn't seen it in the news media or in social media. So I think that there has been some good to it, and hopefully there continues to be good that comes from it, and hopefully we're able to find Brian through whatever means necessary, whether through the news media, police work, or social media efforts, something like that. So I thought that was pretty applicable to what we were talking about.
Mike?
So my only really final thoughts is I've never had a case that we've worked on that I've lost sleep over. But I actually did on this one Sunday night into Monday after the reveal that they had found a body that matched the description of Gabby Petito. I actually had a very emotional reaction to that.
It was a gut punch.
It definitely wasn't, even though I was expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, I was 90%, 99% sure when we filmed that Friday night that she was going to be found deceased. But there was still a glimmer of hope. Like, we talked about in that video, maybe she's in a motel room somewhere, kind of, Gone Girl laughing it up kind of thing. But it was a bit of a gut punch when the body located, believed to be Gabby Petito. And I lost some sleep over that, just thinking about, what that implied, what that meant for the case. I hope I don't have too many more sleepless nights about this case, but Brian's out there. And again, I know I've said this before in this video, I still take the devil's advocate on Brian right now. Like, I believe that he did it. I believe that he killed her, but innocent until proven guilty. And I just don't see proof right now. I don't see the real evidence that he was involved in this crime. Maybe the investigators have it. Maybe the autopsy will provide it. But as we're filming this video, we don't have that.
Right. If we applied the reasonable doubt standard, as we have many times, there's clearly reasonable doubt still. And maybe there will always be.
It's possible. Because, I mean, if Brian Laundrie kills himself and we don't find remains until a year and a half from now, if we ever find remains, and there's no evidence on her body to suggest who did anything, this could be one of those great unsolved mysteries, like right up there with Sean Benet Ramsey.
I think that's a fear that people are having about this case. I was reading, I think it was today or yesterday, about a case. I don't remember the details. It was just something quick where a hiker found a body that's been missing for 53 years or something like that. I mean, that's frightening. Like, this could be what we're looking at. Yeah. Where in our lifetimes, for the most part, we won't know the answer to this case. So, at this point, like, I think it was shocking to find out Gabby was dead. It was shocking to find out before that Brian was missing. Like, why was he missing? Why was nobody watching him? Like, this is something to go on forever.
Yeah.
We might never know. So, yeah, pretty scary. Pretty scary case. So we'll wrap up there. This was an episode of Alien Lizard Humanoids. Again, as Mike mentioned, it was a murder. Gabby was murdered. We don't know by who, but she was murdered. But to keep the titles consistent, this was Alien Lizard Humanoids and the Gabby Petito update, some other topics we covered. Please put any comments you have about it in the comment section. We will answer more in the next episode that we record, which may or may not be the next one we release. And we'll keep working on these. We'll be back with a movie part, I think, next, as long as nothing else comes up on the schedule, and then a murder part soon after. So we'll keep cranking out the content. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.